When running from one monster leads you straight into the arms of another, except this one wears $1,000 suits and controls the city's darkest corners. Lena Hart thought disappearing meant safety. She was wrong. The man next door isn't just dangerous, he's deadly. And the moment their eyes meet through a crack in the door, her carefully hidden life begins to unravel. This is a story of survival, power, and the thin line between protection and possession. Stay with me until the end of this story, and if you enjoy it, please hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. Now, let's begin. The rain came down in sheets that night, turning the Brooklyn streets into rivers of neon and shadow. Lena Hart pressed herself against the graffiti-stained brick wall of the apartment building, her suitcase clutched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Water streamed down her face, mixing with tears she'd stopped acknowledging hours ago. $300. That's what freedom cost. $300 for 2 months' rent in a building where nobody asked questions, and the landlord took cash without wanting a name. The bruise on her cheekbone throbbed with each heartbeat, a parting gift from Marcus, her ex-boyfriend, her mistake, her nightmare. She'd left while he was passed out drunk, had walked 17 blocks in the rain because taking a cab meant a paper trail, meant a way for him to find her. "4th floor, apartment 4B, the landlord had said, shoving a tarnished key into her palm without meeting her eyes. "Heat's included. Don't cause trouble." Lena climbed the stairs slowly, exhaustion pulling at her bones. The building smelled like mildew and old cooking oil, the walls painted a yellow that might have been white decades ago. Each step creaked under her weight, announcing her presence to whoever might be listening. 4th floor. The hallway stretched before her, a tunnel of flickering fluorescent lights and numbered doors. 4A, 4B. Her apartment. The key stuck in the lock at first, and panic fluttered in her chest. What if it didn't work? What if this was all some kind of mistake? But then it turned with a grinding click. The door swung inward on rusty hinges. The apartment was exactly what $300 bought in this neighborhood. A single room with a kitchenette against one wall, a bathroom the size of a closet, and a window that looked out onto an alley filled with dumpsters. The floor was scarred linoleum. The walls were bare except for a water stain in the corner that looked disturbingly like a face. But it was hers. For 2 months, at least, it was hers. Lena set her suitcase down and locked the door, sliding the chain into place. Then she checked it. Twice. 3 times. Her hands were shaking. Safe. She was safe. The lie tasted bitter even as she thought it. Women like her were never really safe. They just moved from one kind of danger to another, always looking over their shoulders, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. She should eat something, should shower, should do any of the normal things normal people did when they came home. But instead, she sank down against the door and let herself cry, really cry, for the first time since she'd run. The sound of voices in the hallway made her freeze. "Told you, Mr. Valenti doesn't want to be disturbed tonight." "I understand that, but this can't wait. Romano's making moves on the waterfront, and tomorrow. Everything can wait until tomorrow." Footsteps passed her door, heavy and purposeful. At least 3 men, maybe 4. Lena held her breath until they'd moved past, until she heard a door open and close somewhere down the hall. Mr. Valenti, her neighbor apparently. She wondered vaguely what kind of man had bodyguards in a building like this, but exhaustion was pulling her under like a riptide. She dragged herself to the ancient radiator that dominated one corner of the room, found a single blanket in the narrow closet, and made a nest on the floor. The bed, a mattress on a rusted frame, looked like it had hosted too many previous tenants and their various miseries. The floor seemed safer somehow. Lena closed her eyes and prayed for dreamless sleep. The sound of shouting woke her at 3 a.m. She bolted upright, heart hammering, Marcus's name on her lips before she remembered. She wasn't there anymore. She'd left. She was safe. Except the shouting was coming from the hallway, from right outside her door. "You don't understand what you're asking." "I understand perfectly. The question is whether you understand what happens if you refuse." The second voice was calm, almost gentle. Somehow that made it worse. Lena crawled to the door, pressed her eye against the peephole. The fisheye lens showed her 3 men in the hallway. 2 of them were large, muscular, wearing dark suits that did nothing to hide the weapons bulging beneath their jackets. They flanked a 3rd man who was on his knees, hands clasped in front of him like he was praying. "Please," the kneeling man begged. "I just need more time, 2 weeks. I can get you the money in 2 weeks." Time is the one thing none of us can buy. The calm voice came from somewhere outside her field of vision. "And you've had 3 months already, Anthony. 3 months of excuses, 3 months of promises. I'm not an unreasonable man, but I'm also not a charity. My daughter needs surgery." "Then you should have thought about that before you borrowed money from me to play poker in Atlantic City." Footsteps. Someone was moving into view. Lena's breath caught. The man who stepped into the frame of her peephole was nothing like she'd expected. He was young, early 30s maybe, with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in magazines, not Brooklyn hallways at 3 a.m. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a black shirt underneath that made his pale skin seem to glow in the fluorescent light. No tie, the top button undone. He looked like money and power and danger wrapped in expensive fabric. "Stand up, Anthony," he said quietly. The kneeling man scrambled to his feet, still shaking. "Mr. Valenti, please." So this was her neighbor. This was the man with the bodyguards and the late-night meetings. Adrian Valenti moved closer to Anthony, and something in his posture made Lena's stomach turn to ice. He wasn't threatening. He wasn't even angry. He was simply inevitable, like watching a storm roll in across the ocean. "I'm going to do something for you," Adrian said. "Something I don't do for many people. I'm going to give you one more chance. Not 2 weeks. That ship has sailed. But 72 hours. 3 days to come up with $40,000. That's impossible. Then I suggest you get creative." Adrian's voice never rose above conversational. "Because on hour 73, I'm going to send Victor and Mikhail here to your home, and they won't be coming to talk." The 2 bodyguards shifted, their bulk seeming to expand in the narrow hallway. "Do we understand each other?" Adrian asked. Anthony nodded frantically. Yes, sir, 3 days. Yes, sir. I'll have it." "I know you will." Adrian adjusted his cuffs, a gesture so casual it seemed obscene given the context. "Because you're a man who loves his family, and men who love their families find ways to protect them, don't they?" It wasn't a question. Anthony practically ran down the hallway, his footsteps echoing on the stairs. Adrian watched him go, his expression unreadable. Then he turned toward his apartment, toward Lena's door, and for a horrible moment she thought he was looking right at her through the peephole. His eyes were dark, not brown, not black, but some color in between that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Even through the distortion of the lens, they were arresting. Intense. The kind of eyes that missed nothing. "Sir," one of the bodyguards said. "The new tenant." She was listening. Lena jerked back from the door like it had burned her. Her heart was trying to climb out of her throat. "I know, Victor." Adrian's voice was quiet, almost amused. "Can you blame her? We weren't exactly subtle." "Should we?" "No. Leave her be. If she's smart, she'll mind her own business, and if she's not—" A pause. "Well, I suppose we'll deal with that if it becomes necessary." Footsteps moved away. A door opened and closed. The hallway fell silent. Lena backed away from the door on shaking legs. Her whole body was trembling, adrenaline flooding her system in waves. What had she stumbled into? What kind of building was this? She grabbed her phone, pulled up the browser, and typed in Adrian Valenti, Brooklyn. The first result made her blood run cold. Adrian Valenti, alleged head of the Valenti crime family, seen leaving courthouse after charges dismissed. Sources say Valenti has consolidated power in Red Hook following the death of his father. Federal investigation into Valenti organization hits another dead end as witness recants testimony. Mafia. Her neighbor was Mafia. Lena dropped the phone like it was a snake. Of course this was where she'd ended up. Running from one kind of danger straight into the arms of another. She spent the rest of the night sitting with her back against the door, a kitchen knife clutched in her hand, waiting for footsteps that never came. Morning arrived gray and cold. Lena hadn't slept more than 20 minutes at a stretch, starting awake at every sound. Her body ached from sitting on the floor. Her eyes felt like they'd been filled with sand. She needed to leave, needed to pack up her suitcase and find another place, somewhere far from Adrian Valenti and his dark eyes and his casual threats. But where? She had maybe $70 left. The next cheapest place she'd found wanted first month, last month, and a security deposit. She needed a job first, needed money, needed time. The one thing none of us can buy. Lena forced herself to stand, her joints cracking in protest. The apartment looked even worse in daylight. Every stain, every crack, every sign of neglect thrown into sharp relief. But the rent was paid for 2 months. She could stay that long, couldn't she? Keep her head down, avoid her neighbor, mind her own business. She'd gotten good at being invisible. Marcus had taught her that. Stay quiet, stay small, don't draw attention. Maybe those same survival skills would work here. The shower was a rust-stained cubicle with water pressure that barely qualified as a drizzle, but it was warm. Lena stood under the spray until her skin turned pink, washing away the rain and the fear and the sleepless night. When she emerged, wrapped in a threadbare towel, she felt almost human. She dressed in the nicest clothes she had, black pants, a white blouse, her only pair of flats that weren't completely worn through, job hunting clothes, invisible clothes. The hallway was empty when she stepped out, locking her door behind her. No bodyguards, no men in expensive suits, just the same dingy corridor and the weak morning light filtering through a window at the far end. She made it 3 steps before Adrian Valenti's door opened. Lena froze. He stepped into the hallway, and she was struck all over again by how he didn't belong here. His suit today was navy blue, fitted perfectly across his shoulders. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He held a cup of coffee in one hand and his phone in the other, reading something on the screen with a slight frown. Then he looked up and saw her. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them moved. Lena felt pinned in place like a butterfly on a board, unable to look away from those dark, assessing eyes. He was even more striking up close. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, lips that would have been almost pretty on a less dangerous face. "Good morning," he said. His voice was different than it had been last night. Warmer, almost friendly. The kind of voice that invited you to relax, to let your guard down. Lena didn't trust it for a second. "Morning?" she managed, her voice coming out smaller than she'd intended. Adrian tilted his head slightly, studying her. She saw the exact moment he cataloged everything. The bruise on her cheekbone she'd tried to cover with makeup, the way she held herself rigid and defensive. The fear in her eyes she couldn't quite hide. "You're the new tenant in 4B, he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Welcome to the building." He raised his coffee cup slightly, a mockery of a toast. "I hope the noise last night didn't disturb you." It was a test. She could feel it. He knew she'd been listening, was waiting to see what she'd do with that information. "I didn't hear anything," Lena lied. Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe, or approval. "Well, that's fortunate. These old buildings, the walls are thin. You hear all sorts of things that are none of your business." The warning was delicate but unmistakable. "I'm good at minding my own business," Lena said. "I imagine you are." His gaze dropped to her outfit, then back to her face. "Job hunting?" She wanted to lie, but something about the way he was looking at her made her think he'd know. "Yes." "What kind of work?" "Anything, waitressing, retail, cleaning, whatever I can find." Adrian was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. He held it out to her between 2 fingers. Lena stared at it like it might explode. "There's a restaurant in Red Hook," Adrian said when she didn't take the card. "Bella Notte. The owner is a friend of mine. Tell him Adrian sent you. He'll find something for you." "I don't—" Lena swallowed hard. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity, it's business. Antonio needs reliable people, and I can tell just by looking at you that you're reliable. You show up, you work hard, you don't cause problems." His eyes held hers. "You're good at being invisible, aren't you?" The observation cut too close to the bone. Lena flinched. "I meant it as a compliment," Adrian said softly. "In this neighborhood, invisibility is a survival skill, one you've clearly mastered." He was still holding out the card. Lena reached for it slowly, her fingers brushing his as she took it. His hands were warm, steady, nothing like Marcus's hands, which were always either clenched in fists or grabbing at her. "Thank you," she heard herself say. "You're welcome." Adrian stepped back, giving her space. "One piece of advice, since we're neighbors. This building, this neighborhood, it's not as dangerous as it seems if you follow a few simple rules. Keep your door locked. Don't answer questions. Don't get involved in things that don't concern you. And if you ever feel unsafe—" He paused. "Well, I'm right next door." Lena didn't know what to say to that. Was it reassurance or another threat? With someone like Adrian Valenti, maybe it was both. "I should go," she said. "Of course, good luck with the job." Adrian raised his coffee cup again, that same mocking gesture. "I'm sure I'll see you around, miss." He was fishing for a name. Lena's mind raced. Should she give him a fake one? But if she lied and he found out, and men like him always found out, it would look suspicious, like she had something to hide beyond the obvious. "Hart," she said. "Lena Hart. Adrian Valenti." He smiled slightly. "But I suppose you already knew that." Her face must have shown something because his smile widened. "The walls are thin, remember? I heard you Googling me at 4 a.m. Heat flooded Lena's cheeks. "I was just being careful, smart." Adrian's expression sobered. "In your position, I'd have done the same thing. Knowledge is power, Lena. Never apologize for arming yourself with information." He turned back to his apartment, and Lena realized with a start that she was being dismissed. The conversation was over. He'd gotten what he wanted. Her name, her measure, her fear. "Mr. Valenti," she said before she could stop herself. He looked back, one hand on his doorframe. "Yes?" "Last night. That man, Anthony." She didn't know why she was asking, what answer she expected. "Will he really come up with the money?" Adrian's expression went carefully neutral. "That depends on how much he loves his family. And if he doesn't, then he'll learn a very difficult lesson about the cost of broken promises." Adrian studied her face. "Does that bother you?" "It should. It absolutely should." But all Lena could think about was Marcus, and the promises he'd broken, and how no one had ever made him pay for any of them. "No," she said quietly. "I don't think it does." Something shifted in Adrian's eyes. A flicker of interest, maybe, or recognition. "Interesting," he murmured. Then he stepped into his apartment and closed the door, leaving Lena alone in the hallway with a business card in her hand and a feeling she couldn't quite name lodged in her chest. Bella Notte was a 10-minute walk from the apartment building, tucked between a laundromat and a bodega on a street lined with brownstones. The restaurant had a green awning and windows painted with gold lettering. Through the glass, Lena could see white tablecloths and wine bottles lining the walls. It looked expensive, the kind of place where people celebrated anniversaries and proposals, not the kind of place that hired desperate women with no experience and bruises on their faces. But she'd walked all the way here. Might as well try. A bell chimed as she pushed open the door. The interior was dim and smelled like garlic and fresh bread. Most of the tables were empty, too early for lunch, too late for breakfast. But a handful of men sat at a corner booth speaking in rapid Italian. One of them looked up as Lena approached. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and a face full of weathered creases. "We're not open yet," he said. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm looking for Antonio." Lena held up the business card like a talisman. "Adrian Valenti sent me." The change in the room was immediate. The other men stopped talking. The older man's expression shifted from irritation to something more cautious, assessing. "Adrian sent you," he repeated slowly. "Yes, sir. He said you might be hiring." Antonio stood, gesturing for her to follow him to a quieter corner of the restaurant. Up close, she could see the family resemblance to the men in the booth, same dark eyes, same olive skin that held the sun like a memory. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lena Hart." "You have experience?" "Some. Waitressing mostly. Coffee shops, diners. Nothing like this." Antonio studied her for a long moment. She could feel him taking inventory, the same way Adrian had, cataloging her fear, her desperation, her carefully concealed bruise. "Why did Adrian send you to me?" The question caught her off guard. I'm his neighbor. I needed a job. He said you might have something. And you didn't think to question why a man like Adrian Valenti would go out of his way to help a neighbor he just met? Lena had thought about it. Had thought about almost nothing else during the walk over. He said it wasn't charity, that it was business. Smart girl. Antonio pulled out a chair, gestured for her to sit. Adrian doesn't do favors without a reason, so let me be clear about what this is. If I hire you, it's because he asked me to, which means you're under his protection, whether you realize it or not. And that means you're also his responsibility. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not sure. It means you represent him now. Your behavior reflects on him. If you steal, if you cause problems, if you bring trouble to my door, that trouble goes to Adrian, and he won't be happy. Antonio leaned back in his chair. On the other hand, it also means nobody messes with you, nobody harasses you, nobody threatens you, nobody lays a hand on you. Because doing that would be insulting Adrian, and people in this neighborhood, they don't insult Adrian Valenti. Lena's mouth had gone dry. I don't want to cause any trouble. Then we'll get along fine. Antonio smiled, and it transformed his whole face, made him look younger, warmer. When can you start? Today. Right now, if you need me. I like your enthusiasm, but we don't open for lunch until 11. Come back tomorrow morning at 10. I'll have Gabriella train you on the basics. Uniform is black pants, white shirt. Looks like you've already got that covered. You get minimum wage plus tips. We pool the tips and split them at the end of each week. It wasn't a fortune, but it was something. More than she'd had yesterday. Thank you, Lena said. Really, thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Adrian. Antonio stood, ending the interview. And Lena, whatever you're running from, leave it at the door when you come here. This is a place of business. We don't do drama. She nodded, not trusting her voice. As she walked back out onto the street, Lena felt something unfamiliar uncurling in her chest. Hope, maybe. Or the possibility of it. She had a job. She had an apartment. She had 2 months to figure out her next move, to save money, to rebuild something resembling a life. All she had to do was keep her head down and stay invisible. She was good at that. The next 3 days passed in a blur of new routines. Wake at 7, shower in the rust-stained cubicle. Walk to Bella Notte by 9:30 to help with prep work before the restaurant opened. Learn the menu, learn the regulars, learn how to carry 3 plates at once without dropping them. Gabriella was patient, a woman in her 50s who'd been working at Bella Notte since it opened 15 years ago. She taught Lena which customers tipped well and which ones to avoid, how to smile through harassment without encouraging it, how to read a table and know when they wanted conversation versus when they wanted to be left alone. The work was hard. Lena's feet ached by the end of each shift, her back protesting from hours of bending and lifting and moving. But there was something almost meditative about it. The rhythm of service, the dance of the kitchen, the way problems had clear solutions. Wrong order? Fix it. Rude customer? Kill them with kindness. Spilled wine? Clean it up and comp the bottle. Simple. Direct. Nothing like the minefield of Marcus's moods. She didn't see Adrian for those 3 days. His apartment remained quiet, the hallway empty whenever she came and went. Part of her wondered if he'd left town. The other part knew better. Men like Adrian Valenti didn't leave. They just operated in the shadows until they needed to step into the light. On the 4th morning, Lena woke to the sound of shouting. Not in the hallway this time. Outside, in the alley below her window. She crawled to the window and looked down. 2 men were dragging someone, between the dumpsters. Even from 4 floors up, she could see the blood. Anthony. The man from the hallway. The one who'd promised to have the money in 72 hours. Lena's stomach turned to ice. She should look away, should close the window, draw the curtains, pretend she'd seen nothing. That was the rule, wasn't it? Don't get involved in things that don't concern you. But she couldn't stop watching. Victor and Mikhail, she recognized them from that first night, were methodical. They pulled Anthony behind the dumpsters, out of view from the street. She couldn't see what they were doing, but she could hear it. The wet, meaty sounds of impact. Anthony's screams cutting off into whimpers. Then silence. The 2 bodyguards emerged, adjusting their jackets. They didn't look rushed or panicked. Just men who'd finished a job, crossing a task off a list. They walked away. Lena stood at the window for a long time, her reflection ghostly in the glass. She should feel horrified, sickened, should call the police or an ambulance or someone, but all she could think about was the 73 hours, the deadline, the promise broken. Adrian Valenti kept his word. She didn't know if that made him better or worse than Marcus, who'd promised 1,000 times to stop hitting her and broke that promise every single time. At least Adrian was honest about what he was. She went to work, got through her shift, smiled at customers, and refilled wine glasses and pretended everything was normal. When she got home that evening, the alley had been cleaned. No blood, no body, just dumpsters and cracked pavement, like it never happened. Lena locked her door and sat on the floor with her back against it, the way she had that first night. She was shaking but couldn't figure out why. Fear, shock, or something else, something she didn't want to name? A knock made her jump. "Lena, it's Adrian." His voice was quiet through the door, gentle, almost. The same tone he'd used when he told Anthony that time was the one thing none of them could buy. "I know you saw," Adrian continued when she didn't answer. "I know you're afraid, but I need you to understand something. Can you open the door, please?" Every instinct screamed at her to stay where she was, to wait until he gave up and left. But Lena had learned the hard way that hiding only delayed the inevitable. Marcus had taught her that too. She opened the door. Adrian stood in the hallway, wearing dark jeans and a black sweater instead of one of his suits. It made him look younger, more approachable, less like a monster. His hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. "May I come in?" he asked. "Do I have a choice?" "Yes." His eyes held hers. "You always have a choice with me, Lena. I'm not Marcus." The sound of her ex's name from Adrian's mouth made her flinch. How did he? But of course he knew. He'd seen the bruise, the fear. He'd probably had her investigated the moment she moved in. Men like Adrian didn't leave things to chance. "How much do you know?" she asked quietly. "Enough. Can I come in?" She stepped back, letting him enter. He moved past her carefully, keeping his distance, not crowding her space. His gaze swept the apartment, the suitcase in the corner, the blanket on the floor where she slept, the empty refrigerator visible through the open kitchenette. "You're not sleeping in the bed," he observed. "It's dirty. I can have someone bring you a new one. I don't need charity." The words came out sharper than she intended. Adrian turned to face her, leaning against the wall by the window. "It's not charity. Consider it an investment in my own peace of mind. Hard to sleep knowing my neighbor is camping on the floor." "Why do you care?" "Because despite what you witnessed today, I'm not actually a monster. I'm just a man who keeps his promises." Adrian's expression was unreadable. Anthony had 3 days to come up with $40,000. He had 3 days to choose his family's safety over his pride. Instead, he spent those 3 days drinking and gambling, hoping the problem would magically solve itself. And when time ran out, you had him killed. "No," Adrian shook his head. "Victor and Mikhail don't kill people in alleyways. They delivered a message. Anthony is in a hospital in Queens with 2 broken legs and a very clear understanding of what happens if he doesn't pay his debt. He has 6 months now instead of 3 days. His daughter will get her surgery, and he'll work off what he owes me, 1 shift at a time until we're square." Lena stared at him. "You're saying you did him a favor." "I'm saying I gave him a choice, and he made it. Actions have consequences. That's not cruelty. It's just reality." Adrian crossed his arms. "You understand that better than most, don't you?" She did. God help her, she did. "Why are you telling me this?" Lena asked. "Because you're afraid of me, and I need you not to be." Adrian pushed off from the wall, taking a step closer. "You're my neighbor. You work at Antonio's restaurant. Whether either of us intended it, you're part of my world now. And in my world, fear makes people do stupid things. They run when they should stand still. They lie when they should tell the truth. They make themselves targets. I'm not stupid. No, you're not. You're smart and careful and so good at being invisible that most people wouldn't even notice you were there." His voice dropped. "But I noticed you, Lena. I noticed you that first morning in the hallway, trying to pretend you hadn't seen anything. I noticed the way you flinch when someone raises their voice, I notice how you check the locks 3 times before you go to sleep. I notice everything. Heat crawled up Lena's neck. Being seen, truly seen, felt more intimate than anything she'd experienced in years. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Nothing you're not willing to give." Adrian held her gaze. "I want you to feel safe in your own home. I want you to be able to sleep in that bed instead of on the floor. I want you to stop looking over your shoulder every time you walk down the street. And maybe, eventually, I want you to understand that not every powerful man is going to hurt you." "You hurt Anthony." "Anthony borrowed money he couldn't pay back and then lied to me about it. You're not Anthony." Adrian's voice gentled. "You're not a threat, Lena. You're not a problem. You're just a woman trying to start over. And I respect that. I respect you." She wanted to believe him, wanted it with an intensity that frightened her. "Why?" The question came out broken. "Why do you care about some random woman who moved in next door?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost vulnerable. "Because 3 years ago, my sister showed up at my door with a suitcase and a black eye, running from a man who'd promised to love her. And I wasn't there when it mattered. I was too busy building an empire, too focused on being powerful and feared. By the time I found out what was happening, by the time I went to help her," he stopped. "I was too late. She'd gone back to him. And 3 months later, she was dead." Lena's breath caught. "Adrian, her name was Sophia. She was 26 years old, and she died because I didn't see the signs, because I was too wrapped up in my own world to notice she was drowning." Adrian's eyes were dark, haunted. "So when I see you, scared, running, trying so hard to disappear, I can't just look away. I won't make that mistake again." Understanding crashed over Lena like a wave. This wasn't about her. This was about his sister, his guilt, his need to save someone because he couldn't save the person who mattered most. She should be angry about that, should resent being someone's redemption project. But all she felt was a strange, aching recognition. They were both haunted, weren't they? Both carrying ghosts they couldn't put down. "I'm not your sister," she said quietly. "I know. And you can't save me. I have to save myself." "I know that too." Adrian moved toward the door, giving her space again. "But I can make sure you're safe while you do it. I can give you time and space and the certainty that no one's going to hurt you on my watch. Will you let me do that much?" Lena thought about the alley, about Anthony's broken legs and the 72 hours, and the way Adrian had said time is the one thing none of us can buy. He was dangerous, violent, exactly the kind of man she should run from. But he was also honest, direct, and something in his eyes when he talked about his sister made her think that maybe, just maybe, he understood what it meant to be powerless. "Okay," she heard herself say. Adrian smiled, and it transformed his face the same way Antonio's smile had, made him look younger, less untouchable. "Thank you." He pulled a phone from his pocket. Not the one she'd seen him using, a different one, simpler. He held it out. "Take this. I have a phone. Not one that Marcus can track. This one's clean. Only 3 numbers programmed in. Mine, Victor's, and the restaurant. If you ever need anything, if you ever feel unsafe, you call. Day or night. Understand?" Lena took the phone slowly. It was heavier than it looked, solid and real in her palm. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again. "Because you remind me that there's more to life than broken promises and consequence." Adrian reached for the door. "Get some sleep, Lena. You're safe here. I promise." He left before she could respond, his footsteps fading down the hallway. Lena stood in the middle of her dingy apartment holding a stranger's phone and realized with a start that she believed him. Adrian Valenti kept his promises, even the ones that involved broken legs and hospital visits, maybe especially those. She looked at the bed, then at her blanket on the floor. Then she did something she hadn't done since she left Marcus. She took a risk. Lena crawled into this bed, pulled the thin covers up to her chin, and closed her eyes. If the mattress was dirty, if it carried the weight of other people's sorrows, well, she'd carried worse. And for the first time in months, she slept through the night. The new mattress arrived 2 days later, along with sheets that still had the tags on them, and a blanket that smelled like lavender instead of mildew. The delivery men hauled away the old bed without comment, like this was perfectly normal, like women in rundown apartments got furniture upgrades every day. Lena tried to refuse it, opened her mouth to say she hadn't asked for this, didn't want to owe anyone anything. But Victor, who'd accompanied the delivery men up the stairs, just handed her a note written in neat, precise handwriting. Not charity. Investment in both our peace of mind. She kept the mattress. Life fell into a rhythm after that. Work at Bellanote from 10 to 6, 5 days a week. Sundays and Mondays off. Tips pooled and distributed on Friday nights, usually enough to buy groceries and save a little for the future. Adrian was a shadow in her life. Present, but not intrusive. She'd see him sometimes in the hallway, always dressed like he was on his way to somewhere important. They'd nod to each other, exchange pleasantries. Occasionally he'd ask how work was going, if she needed anything. She always said she was fine, he never pushed. But she'd started to notice things. Small things. The way people treated her differently when they found out where she lived. The way Antonio never let drunk customers get too handsy. The way Gabriella made sure Lena got the good sections on busy nights. The way the walk home after dark felt safer, like invisible eyes were watching over her. Protection. Whether she'd asked for it or not. It should have bothered her. Should have felt like another cage, another form of control. Instead, it felt like she could breathe for the first time in years. 3 weeks after Anthony's lesson, Lena was walking home from work when she saw him. Not Anthony, Marcus. Her ex-boyfriend was standing across the street from her building, hands shoved in his pockets, watching the entrance. Even from half a block away, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he shifted his weight from foot to foot like a predator waiting for prey. He'd found her. Terror flooded Lena's system, cold and sharp. Her first instinct was to run. Back to the restaurant, to somewhere public, anywhere but here. But then she remembered the phone in her pocket. The promise. If you ever feel unsafe, you call. Lena ducked into the bodega on the corner, pulled out the phone Adrian had given her, and dialed his number with shaking fingers. He answered on the second ring. Lena. He's here. Her voice came out thin, reedy. Marcus. He's outside my building. A pause, then, where are you right now? The bodega, corner of 5th and Union. Stay there, don't go outside, I'm 5 minutes away. The line went dead. Lena stood in the narrow aisle between shelves of canned goods and cheap wine, trying to remember how to breathe. The bodega owner, an elderly Korean man she'd seen but never spoken to, watched her from behind the counter with concerned eyes. You okay, miss? I'm fine, she lied. 4 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up to the curb outside. Victor got out first, followed by Mikhail. Then Adrian, dressed in one of his perfect suits, his face carved from stone. He saw her through the window and gestured for her to come out. Lena's legs felt like water, but she forced herself to move. The bodega owner called something after her in Korean. A blessing, maybe, or a warning. Adrian met her at the door, his hand settling on her lower back. The touch was brief, professional, but it steadied her. Point him out, he said quietly. Lena's eyes found Marcus across the street. He'd spotted the SUV, was watching them with narrowed eyes and clenched fists. The one in the gray jacket, she whispered. Adrian studied Marcus for a long moment. Then he turned to Victor and spoke in rapid Italian. Victor nodded and crossed the street with Mikhail at his side. What are they going to do? Lena asked. Have a conversation. Adrian's voice was calm, almost gentle. Come on, let's get you inside. He guided her across the street and into the building, his body between her and Marcus the whole time. She could hear Victor's voice, low, dangerous, but couldn't make out the words. Inside the building, Adrian walked her up to her floor, unlocked her door with the spare key she didn't know he had, and ushered her inside. Sit, he said, pointing to the bed. Lena sat. Adrian pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke in Italian again. Then he pocketed it and looked at her. How did he find you? I don't know. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, didn't use my credit cards. I was so careful. Hey, Adrian crouched in front of her, his hands on her knees. The gesture was startlingly intimate. You did everything right. Men like Marcus, they're hunters. They don't stop until they find what they're looking for. But he made a mistake coming here. What are you going to do to him? What do you want me to do to him? Question hung in the air between them. Lena thought about the alley, about Anthony's screams cutting off into whimpers, about broken legs and hospital visits and promises kept. I don't want him dead, she said quietly. Okay, what do you want? I want him to leave me alone. I want to stop being afraid every time I hear footsteps behind me. Her voice broke. I want to be free of him. Adrian nodded slowly. Then that's what you'll get. He stood, made another call. More Italian. Then he sat beside her on the bed, close enough that she could feel his warmth, but not touching. Victor and Mikhail are explaining some things to Marcus right now, he said, about boundaries and consequences and what happens to men who stalk women in my neighborhood. By the time they're done, he'll understand that coming anywhere near you again would be a very poor life choice. And if he doesn't listen, Adrian's smile was cold, then I'll make sure the lesson sticks. They sat in silence for a while. Lena's heart was still racing, adrenaline making her hands shake. She wanted to cry or scream or break something, wanted to be anywhere but in this moment, facing the reality that she'd never be truly free of her past. I thought I could disappear, she whispered. I thought if I ran far enough, changed my number, stayed invisible, I thought that would be enough. It never is, Adrian said quietly. Not with men like him. They don't see you as a person, they see you as property, and they'll tear the world apart to get their property back. How do I stop it? You can't. Not alone. He turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. But you're not alone anymore, Lena. You haven't been since the moment you moved in next door. I don't want to owe you. You don't owe me anything. This isn't a debt, it's just... He paused, searching for words. It's just what you do when you see someone drowning. You throw them a rope. And what if I drag you down with me? Adrian's laugh was soft, almost sad. I'm already at the bottom, Lena. Have been for years. You can't pull me somewhere I already am. His phone buzzed. He read the message, then stood. Marcus is gone. Victor gave him a very thorough explanation of what this neighborhood is and who I am. He won't be back. Adrian moved toward the door. But just in case, I'm putting one of my men in the hallway tonight. And tomorrow, I want you to move to a different apartment in the building. I can't afford... Same rent, better unit. 3rd floor faces the street instead of the alley. 2 locks and a deadbolt. He paused at the door. Please, Lena, let me do this much. She should say no. Should insist on handling her own problems, on staying independent, but God, she was tired of being afraid. Okay, she said. Adrian's smile was like sunrise. Good. Pack tonight. Someone will move your things in the morning. He hesitated, then added, And Lena, I meant what I said. You're safe here. As long as I'm breathing, no one touches you. I promise. He left. Lena sat on her new mattress in her dingy apartment and let herself cry, really cry, for the 2nd time since she'd run. But these tears felt different, cleaner somehow, like she was washing away the last of Marcus's hold on her. When she finally stopped, when she finally dragged herself up to start packing her meager belongings, she caught sight of her reflection in the darkened window. For the first time in months, the woman staring back at her didn't look quite so afraid. The new apartment was smaller but cleaner, with hardwood floors that didn't creak and windows that actually opened without sticking. Lena stood in the center of the empty living room on a gray Saturday morning, watching Victor and another man she didn't recognize carry in her suitcase and the few boxes she'd accumulated in 3 weeks. It wasn't much. A life condensed into containers you could carry in 2 trips. Miss Hart. Victor set down the last box with surprising gentleness for a man his size. Mr. Valenti wanted me to tell you the locks have all been changed. These are your keys. He held out a ring with 3 brass keys, each newly cut and shining. Door, deadbolt, and one for the building's back entrance, in case you ever need another way out. Lena took the keys, their weight solid and real in her palm. Thank you. Victor nodded and left without another word, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. The other man, younger with nervous energy, lingered in the doorway. I'm Danny, he said. I'll be outside tonight. And tomorrow night. Mr. Valenti said to tell you I'm invisible unless you need me. You don't have to Yeah, I do. Danny's smile was quick, apologetic. Boss's orders. But don't worry, I'm good at being invisible. You won't even know I'm there. He disappeared before she could argue, leaving Lena alone in her new space. She spent the rest of the morning unpacking, which took all of 20 minutes. Clothes in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom, the blanket Adrian had sent folded at the foot of the bed. When everything was put away, the apartment still looked empty, unlived in, like she was a ghost haunting her own life. Lena made herself coffee in the tiny kitchenette. The first time she'd used it, the first time she'd felt settled enough to bother, and sat on the floor by the window, watching the street below. Saturday afternoon in Brooklyn. People walking dogs, pushing strollers, carrying groceries. Normal lives. Normal problems. She wondered if she'd ever have that again, or if Adrian's protection had just traded one kind of cage for another, gilded but still locked. A knock at the door made her jump, coffee sloshing over the rim of her mug. "It's me," Adrian's voice called through the wood. "Can I come in?" Lena opened the door to find him holding 2 bags from the Italian deli 3 blocks over. He was dressed casually again, dark jeans, a gray sweater, his hair slightly damp like he'd just showered. It made him look almost normal, almost like someone she might have met in a coffee shop instead of a hallway at 3 in the morning. "Lunch," he said, holding up the bags. "I figured you probably haven't eaten yet." "How did you know?" "Because you never eat when you're anxious. Antonio mentioned it, said you pick at your food during your breaks, barely finish half your plate." Adrian's expression was carefully neutral. Can I come in? Or would you prefer I leave this at the door?" Lena stepped back, letting him enter. He moved past her with the same careful distance he always maintained, never crowding, never presuming. It should have made her feel better. Instead, it made her hyper-aware of the space between them, of how easy it would be to close that gap. She didn't. Just closed the door and watched as Adrian unpacked sandwiches, pasta salad, cannoli onto her small kitchen counter like he'd done this 100 times before. "You don't have to take care of me," she said quietly. "I know." Adrian unwrapped a sandwich, prosciutto and mozzarella. She could smell the basil from across the room. "But I wanted to check on you, make sure you're settling in okay, and maybe—" He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "Maybe I wanted the company. It's been a long week." The admission surprised her. Men like Adrian didn't admit to loneliness, didn't show weakness. But there it was, hanging in the air between them. The truth that for all his power and control, he was just as alone as she was. "What happened?" Lena asked. Adrian was quiet for a moment, dividing the food onto paper plates he'd brought with him. "There's a situation developing. Nothing you need to worry about, but it's been keeping me up at night. Romano, the man Victor mentioned that first night, he's making moves on territory that's been in my family for 3 generations. Testing boundaries, seeing how far he can push before I push back. And you're going to push back. I have to. In this world, weakness is blood in the water. You show it once and everyone starts circling." He handed her a plate, their fingers brushing. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because yesterday I promised you'd be safe, and I wanted to make sure that promise was holding up in the light of day." Lena took the plate and sat on the floor by the window again. After a moment, Adrian joined her, his long legs stretched out beside hers, close but not touching. "Marcus called me last night," she said. "On my old phone." Adrian's jaw tightened. "What did he say?" "That I belonged to him, that running was pointless because he'd always find me, that no one else would ever want me, not after everything he'd—" Her voice broke. She swallowed hard, forced the words out. "After everything he'd done to me." "Did you answer?" "No, but I listened to the voicemail about 10 times before I deleted it." Lena set her plate down, her appetite gone. He sounded so sure, like it was inevitable that I'd come back, like I didn't have a choice. "You always have a choice," Adrian said quietly, "even when it doesn't feel like it, even when all the options are terrible, you still get to choose." "Is that what you tell yourself? When you're breaking someone's legs in an alley?" The words came out sharper than she intended, but Adrian didn't flinch, just looked at her with those dark, assessing eyes that seemed to see straight through to her bones. "Yes," he said simply. I tell myself that Anthony chose to borrow money he couldn't repay, that he chose to lie to me about it, that he chose pride over his family's safety. And I tell myself that my choice, to enforce consequences, is what keeps this whole system from collapsing into chaos. He paused. Do I like it? No. Do I sleep well at night? Sometimes. But I made my choice a long time ago, Lena. I chose this life, this responsibility, and I live with what that means. Doesn't it ever bother you, the violence? Every single day. Adrian's voice was soft, almost too quiet to hear. But you want to know what bothers me more? The alternative. Because in my world, there are only two kinds of people, wolves and sheep. And the sheep don't last long. Lena thought about Marcus, about the first time he'd hit her, how he'd cried afterward and promised it would never happen again. How she'd believed him because the alternative, accepting that she'd fallen in love with a monster, was too painful to face. I used to be a sheep, she said. No? Adrian shook his head. You were never a sheep. Sheep don't run. They don't survive. They just endure until something tears them apart. He reached over and gently touched the fading bruise on her cheekbone, his fingers impossibly soft. You're something else. Something stronger. I don't feel strong. Strength isn't about feeling invincible. It's about being terrified and doing what needs to be done anyway. His hand dropped back to his lap. You left Marcus. You rebuilt your life from nothing. You're still here, still fighting. That's strength, Lena. Real strength. The kind that matters. She wanted to believe him, wanted to see herself the way he apparently saw her, not as a victim, not as prey, but as something capable of survival, of choice. What did Victor say to Marcus yesterday? She asked. After I went inside. Adrian smiled slightly. The truth. That you're under my protection. That this neighborhood belongs to me, and anyone who hurts what's mine answers to me personally. That if Marcus values his ability to walk, he should forget you exist. The smile faded. And that if he ever tries to contact you again, Victor and Mikhail will make Anthony's lesson look gentle by comparison. And you think that'll be enough? To make him leave me alone? Marcus is a coward who gets off on hurting people weaker than himself. Now he knows you're not weak. You have me standing behind you. Cowards don't pick fights they can't win. Adrian's voice hardened. But if he's stupid enough to try anyway, I'll handle it. Permanently. The casual way he said it, like he was discussing the weather instead of murder, should have terrified her, but all Lena felt was a strange, guilty relief. Because for the first time since she'd left, she actually believed she might be free. They ate in comfortable silence after that, watching the street below. Lena discovered she was hungry after all, the sandwich better than anything she'd had in weeks. Adrian told her about the restaurant, about how Antonio had opened it with money from Adrian's father 30 years ago, how it had become a safe space for the neighborhood, neutral ground where business could be discussed over wine and pasta. It's important, Adrian explained, to have places where the violence stops, where people can just be people instead of soldiers or enemies or debts to be collected. Antonio provides that. It's why I protect him, why I protect the restaurant. Is that why you sent me there? Because it's safe? Partly. But also because Antonio needed someone reliable, and I could tell just by looking at you that you'd be good at the work. Adrian finished his sandwich, crumpled the wrapper. You have this way of reading people, anticipating what they need before they ask. It's a gift. Or a survival skill. Sometimes they're the same thing. Lena thought about that as she sipped her coffee, now cold, but still sweet. How many of her gifts were really just scars in disguise? How much of who she'd become was shaped by Marcus's fists and her need to predict his moods, to become invisible when the storm was coming? Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. Your sister, Sophia, what was she like? Adrian's expression shuddered, walls slamming down behind his eyes. For a moment, Lena thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed, a sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. She was brilliant, funny, could light up a room just by walking into it. His voice was carefully controlled, each word measured. She wanted to be a teacher, loved kids, loved stories, used to say she was going to change the world one classroom at a time. He paused. And then she met Dominic, and everything changed. What happened to him after she died? Adrian's smile was cold, sharp as a knife. Nothing you need to worry about. Let's just say he won't be hurting anyone else. The implication hung heavy in the air. Lena should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the casual admission of violence, of revenge, of a life taken in payment for a life lost. But all she could think was, good. Does that make me a bad person? She asked quietly. That I'm glad he's gone? No, it makes you human. Adrian stood, started gathering the empty containers and wrappers. Forgiveness is overrated, Lena. Sometimes the right response to cruelty is justice, and sometimes justice looks like making sure the person who hurt you can never do it again. He threw everything away in her small trash can, then turned back to her. I should go, let you settle in, but before I do, he pulled a small envelope from his pocket and held it out. This is yours, your first week's tips from the restaurant. Lena took the envelope, felt the weight of cash inside. Antonio said tips get distributed on Fridays. They do, but I asked him to give me your share early. I figured you could use it. Adrian moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. There's a farmer's market tomorrow morning in Red Hook, near the piers. I was thinking of going, picking up some fresh vegetables for the week. You're welcome to join me if you'd like. No pressure. It wasn't a date. Couldn't be a date. Men like Adrian Valenti didn't date waitresses from broken homes. This was just neighborly. Two people sharing space, sharing a meal, sharing a Sunday morning. So why did Lena's heart skip when she said, "What time?" 9. I'll knock on your door. He left before she could second-guess herself, before she could analyze all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Lena listened to his footsteps fade down the hallway, then opened the envelope. $300. A week's tips that probably should have been 100, maybe 150 on a good week. The rest was clearly from Adrian. A gift disguised as earnings, charity hidden behind the facade of work. She should be angry, should march over to his apartment and throw the money in his face, demand he stop trying to save her. But Lena had learned something in the weeks since she'd run. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Pride didn't pay rent or buy groceries or build a future. Pride was what had kept her with Marcus long after she should have left. Too embarrassed to admit she'd made a mistake. Too proud to ask for help. She put the money in the small lockbox she kept under her bed, her emergency fund, her escape plan, her freedom slowly accumulating in $20 bills. Then she lay down on her new mattress in her new apartment and thought about farmers markets and dark eyes and the strange, terrifying possibility that maybe she was allowed to want something beyond mere survival. Maybe she was allowed to want more. The thought followed her into sleep, gentle as a prayer. The next morning dawned clear and cold, late October sun slanting through her windows and turning the hardwood floors to gold. Lena woke early, showered, changed clothes 3 times before settling on jeans and a soft blue sweater that brought out her eyes. She told herself it didn't matter what she wore, that this wasn't anything special, that Adrian probably wouldn't even notice. But she still checked her reflection twice before the knock came at her door. Adrian looked unfairly good in the morning light, dressed in dark jeans and a leather jacket over a white t-shirt, casual, almost boyish. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd only run his fingers through it instead of using product, and there was a coffee stain on his sleeve that made him seem suddenly, startlingly human. "Ready?" he asked. Lena grabbed her jacket and followed him downstairs. Danny was leaning against the building's entrance, trying to look casual and failing. He straightened when he saw them, and Adrian shook his head. "Day off, Danny. Go home. Get some sleep." "But Mr. Valenti, I've got her. Go." Danny hesitated, then nodded and walked away. Lena watched him go, then turned to Adrian. "He looks exhausted. He's been outside your door for 16 hours straight. I told him to work in shifts, but he's trying to prove himself. New to the organization, wants to show he's reliable." "Is he? Reliable?" "He's loyal. Sometimes that's more important." Adrian started walking and Lena fell into step beside him. Skill you can teach. Loyalty, you can't. The farmer's market was a 20-minute walk through neighborhoods that shifted from run-down to gentrified and back again, Brooklyn in all its contradictions. They walked in comfortable silence, Adrian's presence beside her a strange kind of anchor. People on the street seemed to recognize him, nodding as they passed, stepping aside to let him through. But no one approached. No one intruded. The market was crowded, vendors selling everything from organic vegetables to artisan bread to hand-poured candles. Adrian moved through the stalls with surprising ease, stopping to examine tomatoes, to smell herbs, to debate the merits of different apple varieties with an elderly woman who called him Adrian Dear and pinched his cheek like he was 10 years old. Mrs. Chen has been selling produce here for 40 years, Adrian explained after they'd moved on, his arms full of paper bags. She knew my father, used to sneak me cookies when I was a kid. You grew up here? In Brooklyn? Born and raised, my father built his empire from a 2-bedroom apartment in Red Hook. By the time I was born, we'd moved to a brownstone in Carroll Gardens, but he never forgot where he came from. Never let me forget either. Adrian paused at a stall selling fresh pasta, examined the options. He used to say that power without roots is just violence, that if you don't remember why you're fighting, you become the thing you're fighting against. Do you believe that? I used to. Adrian selected 2 packages of fresh ravioli, paid the vendor with cash. Now I'm not so sure. Sometimes I think the fight changes you whether you want it to or not. Sometimes I think we all become monsters eventually. It's just a question of what kind. Lena thought about Sophia, about Dominic, about justice that looked like making sure the person who hurt you could never do it again. What kind of monster are you? She asked quietly. Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. The kind that keeps his promises, even when it costs him everything. They moved on to the next stall, the moment passing like smoke, but Lena felt the weight of it settle in her chest. Because she was starting to understand what Adrian was, not a savior or a villain, but something more complicated, something human. A man trying to be good in a world that punished goodness. A man carrying ghosts he couldn't put down, just like her. They bought cheese and bread and olive oil, fresh vegetables and herbs that smelled like summer even though winter was coming. Adrian insisted on paying for everything, waving away her protests with the kind of casual authority that made arguments seem pointless. Consider it payment, he said, for your company. I don't get to do this often. Normal things. Normal mornings. Why not? Because normal is a luxury in my world. Every interaction is a negotiation, every relationship transactional. You're either useful or you're a threat. There's no middle ground. He shifted the bags in his arms. But with you, I don't know. It's different. You don't want anything from me except to be left alone. It's refreshing. I'm using your protection, Lena pointed out. Doesn't that make our relationship transactional too? No, because I offered. You didn't ask. Adrian stopped walking, turned to face her fully. That's the difference, Lena. You're not here because you're trying to use me, or manipulate me, or get something from me. You're here because I saw someone drowning and threw them a rope. And you grabbed it because the alternative was going under. That's not transactional. That's just human. The word again. Human. Like it was something rare and precious instead of the baseline of existence. Can I ask you something? Lena said. Anything. That night with Anthony, when you gave him 72 hours, did you actually expect him to come up with the money? Adrian's expression darkened. No, I knew he wouldn't. He's a gambler, Lena. Gamblers don't suddenly develop fiscal responsibility when a deadline looms. They double down, hoping for a miracle that never comes. So why give him the choice at all? Because choice matters. Because I needed him to understand that what happened next was a direct result of his decisions, not mine. I didn't break his legs. His choices broke them. I was just the consequence. Adrian started walking again, his voice carefully controlled. In my world, you can't let people believe they're victims of circumstance. You have to make them own their choices, otherwise the whole system falls apart. It was cold logic, brutal even, but Lena understood it in a way she wouldn't have a month ago. Because hadn't she spent years telling herself that Marcus's violence was circumstantial? That if she just tried harder, loved him better, stayed quieter, he'd stop? That his fists were a response to her failures rather than his choices? I blame myself, she said quietly, for a long time. Every time Marcus hit me, I'd think about what I'd done to provoke it, what I could have done differently. And now? Now I know it was never my fault, that he chose to hurt me because it made him feel powerful, that I was just there, convenient. Lena swallowed hard, but knowing it intellectually and believing it emotionally are two different things. Adrian stopped walking again, set his bags down on a bench, and turned to her. "Look at me." She did. "It was never your fault," he said, each word deliberate and clear. "Not the first time, not the 100th time. Marcus is responsible for Marcus's choices. You are responsible for yours. And your choice to survive, to leave, to rebuild, that took more courage than he'll ever have." Tears burned in Lena's eyes. She blinked them back, forced herself to breathe. "Thank you." "Don't thank me for telling you the truth." Adrian picked up the bags again. "Come on. Let's get this food home before the ice cream melts." "We bought ice cream?" "Vanilla bean from that organic place you were eyeing. Don't think I didn't notice." She hadn't realized he'd been paying attention. But of course he had. Adrian noticed everything. Had said so himself that first night in her apartment. "I notice you, Lena." They walked back through Brooklyn as the morning warmed, the sun climbing higher and burning off the early chill. Adrian told her about the neighborhood, about the families who'd lived here for generations, and the new money pushing them out, about the delicate balance between progress and preservation. "My father used to say that a neighborhood without its people is just buildings," Adrian said. "That what makes a place matter is the memories embedded in the concrete, the stories passed down through generations. He fought to keep this place intact, to keep the families here even when developers offered millions for their homes. And you're continuing that fight. Trying to. But it's harder now. The city's changing faster than I can control. Money talks louder than loyalty." He sighed. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm just postponing the inevitable. If all my father's work, all my work, will just get swept away by the next wave of gentrification." "Does that make you angry?" "It makes me tired." Adrian's smile was sad. "But anger I can use. Tired just makes me want to give up. And I can't do that. Too many people counting on me." Lena thought about Danny, exhausted but loyal, standing guard outside her door for 16 hours. About Antonio and his restaurant, neutral ground bought with Adrian's father's money. About Mrs. Chen selling vegetables at the farmer's market, pinching Adrian's cheek like he was still a child. "They love you," she said. "The people in this neighborhood. You're not just feared, you're loved. Love and fear go hand in hand in my world. Sometimes I'm not sure where one ends and the other begins." They reached her building just as the clock tower 3 blocks over chimed 11. Adrian walked her upstairs, helped her carry the bags to her apartment, and started unpacking groceries into her small refrigerator without being asked. "You don't have to," Lena began. "I know, but I want to." He arranged vegetables in the crisper with surprising care. "Besides, half this food is for me anyway. I was hoping you'd let me cook you dinner sometime this week. Payment for putting up with my existential crisis at the farmer's market." The offer hung in the air between them, casual but weighted with possibility. Dinner. In her apartment or his. Just the two of them, and whatever this thing was that kept growing between them like a vine through concrete, unwanted but inevitable. "Okay," Lena said. "Yeah? Yeah, I'd like that." Adrian's smile was genuine this time, bright and real. "Wednesday. I'm free after 7. "Wednesday works." He finished unpacking, folded the bags neatly and set them on her counter. Then he moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the knob, the same gesture he'd made twice now, like he was always on the verge of saying something more, but thought better of it. "Adrian?" Lena said. He turned back. "This morning. The farmer's market, the groceries, all of it. Thank you. I haven't felt this normal in, I can't remember how long. You deserve normal, Lena. You deserve soft mornings and fresh vegetables and ice cream you don't have to feel guilty about wanting." His voice was quiet, almost tender. "You deserve so much more than what life's given you." He left before she could respond, before she could tell him that maybe he deserved more too, that maybe they both did. Lena spent the rest of Sunday putting away groceries and thinking about Wednesday, about dinner and dark eyes and the terrifying, exhilarating possibility that she was falling for a man who broke legs in alleys and kept promises written in blood. She should run, should pack her suitcase and disappear before this thing between them became something she couldn't walk away from. But Lena was tired of running, and for the first time in years, she wanted to stay. Monday came too soon, pulling Lena back into the rhythm of work. Bella Notte was busy, tourists mixing with regulars, the lunch rush bleeding into dinner without pause. Gabriella worked beside her with practiced efficiency, the two of them moving in sync like dancers who'd rehearsed the routine 1,000 times. "You seem different," Gabriella said during a rare quiet moment, both of them folding napkins in the back. "Lighter? Something good happen?" Lena thought about the farmer's market, about Adrian's smile and the ice cream melting in her freezer. "Maybe. I don't know yet. Let me guess." Gabriella's eyes sparkled with knowing amusement. "Tall, dark, expensive taste in suits?" Heat flooded Lena's cheeks. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't, and I'm sure it's a coincidence that Adrian's been in a better mood lately too. Less brooding, more human." Gabriella leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Word of advice? Don't fight it. I've known that boy since he was in diapers, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. We're just neighbors. Neighbors don't buy you new mattresses. Neighbors don't send bodyguards to stand watch outside your door. And neighbors definitely don't spend Sunday mornings at farmers markets when they could be sleeping in or doing whatever it is crime bosses do on their days off." Gabriella patted Lena's hand. "I'm not saying it'll be easy. Loving a man like Adrian never is, but if anyone deserves a shot at happiness, it's him. And maybe you too, sweetheart." Lena wanted to argue, to insist this wasn't love, wasn't even close, but the words stuck in her throat. Because maybe Gabriella was right. Maybe this thing growing between them was exactly what she feared it was. Inevitable and dangerous, and already too late to stop. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like relief. Wednesday arrived with rain, the kind of cold November storm that turned Brooklyn's streets into rivers and made the whole city smell like wet concrete and regret. Lena left work early, her clothes damp despite her umbrella, her hair curling in the humidity. She climbed the stairs to her apartment with a mixture of anticipation and dread coiling in her stomach. Dinner with Adrian, just dinner, nothing more. She'd repeated that to herself all week, trying to believe it, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened every time she thought about him, the way his voice seemed to echo in her head at odd moments, soft and dangerous and impossibly gentle. Her apartment was warm when she entered, the radiator hissing and clanking in the corner. Lena showered quickly, changed into clean jeans and a soft gray sweater, dried her hair until it fell in waves around her shoulders. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. This was just dinner, between neighbors, nothing to get nervous about. The knock came at 7 exactly. Adrian stood in the hallway holding a paper bag that smelled like garlic and wine, his hair wet from the rain, his leather jacket dark with moisture. He'd changed since this morning. She'd heard him leave around 6, had listened to his footsteps fade down the hall, and now wore dark jeans and a black sweater that made his eyes look even darker. "Hi," he said, and his smile was almost shy. "I brought supplies. Hope you like carbonara." Lena stepped back, letting him in. "You're cooking?" "Don't sound so surprised. I'm actually pretty good in the kitchen." Adrian set the bag on her counter and started unpacking. Fresh pasta, eggs, pancetta, parmesan, a bottle of white wine. "My father insisted all his children know how to cook. Said a man who can't feed himself is half a man." "Did you have brothers, sisters besides Sophia?" "2 brothers, Marco and Luca, both older." Adrian's expression tightened. "Marco runs operations in Queens now. Luca's in Miami, expanding our interests down south. We don't talk much anymore." "Why not?" "Because they wanted me to stay out of Brooklyn when our father died. Wanted to divide his territory between them and leave me with nothing." Adrian pulled out a cutting board from her minimal kitchen supplies, began dicing the pancetta with practiced efficiency. "I refused. Fought them for 3 years until they finally accepted that I wasn't going anywhere. This neighborhood, these people, they're mine to protect. My brothers don't understand that. They see power as something to be exploited. I see it as responsibility. Lena watched him work, his hands steady and sure. You really believe that, don't you? That your power is meant to protect people? I have to believe it. Otherwise, I'm just a thug in an expensive suit. Adrian set a pot of water to boil, added salt with the kind of casual expertise that spoke of years of practice. My father used to say that the only difference between a king and a tyrant is who they serve. A king serves his people. A tyrant serves himself. He looked up at her, his eyes intense. I'm trying to be a king, Lena, even if the kingdom is just a few blocks of Brooklyn. She should have found it ridiculous, this comparison of organized crime to monarchy, this romanticization of violence and control. But there was something in the way Adrian said it, something raw and honest, that made her believe he meant every word. Can I help? She asked. Open the wine. Glasses are... He paused, looked around her sparse kitchen. Do you have glasses? I have 2 mugs. Adrian laughed, the sound warm and unexpected. Mugs it is. Very bohemian. Lena poured wine into her mismatched coffee mugs while Adrian cooked, the small apartment filling with the smell of crisping pancetta and garlic. He moved around her kitchen like he belonged there, like this was something they'd done 100 times before instead of a first. She found herself relaxing despite her nerves, the wine warming her from the inside out. Tell me about before, Adrian said as he whisked eggs and cheese together. Before Marcus. What were you like? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. Marcus certainly never had. To him, she'd existed only in relation to himself. His girlfriend, his possession, his punching bag. Who she'd been before him had been irrelevant. I wanted to be a writer, Lena heard herself say. Fiction, mostly, short stories. I had this idea that I could tell people's truths through made-up characters, that fiction was just another way of being honest. She sipped her wine, the memory bittersweet. I went to community college for a semester, took creative writing classes. My professor said I had talent, said I should transfer to a 4-year school, really pursue it. What stopped you? Marcus. We met at a party my roommate dragged me to. He was charming at first, attentive, made me feel special, like I was the only person in the room who mattered. Lena's laugh was hollow. Classic story, right? Girl meets boy, girl falls in love, girl slowly realizes she's in a nightmare but can't figure out how to wake up. Adrian added the pasta to the boiling water, his movements careful and controlled. When did you realize? That it was a nightmare? The first time he hit me, 3 months in. She touched her wrist unconsciously, could still feel the phantom ache. He cried afterward, begged me to forgive him, said it would never happen again. And I believed him because I wanted to, because admitting the truth meant admitting I'd made a terrible mistake. It wasn't your fault, Adrian said quietly. I know that now. But for a long time, I didn't. For a long time, I thought if I just tried harder, loved him better, he'd go back to being the person I met at that party. I didn't understand that person never really existed. He was just a mask Marcus wore until he didn't need to anymore. The pasta timer went off. Adrian drained the noodles, tossed them with the egg mixture and pancetta, the heat cooking the eggs into a silky sauce. He plated the food with surprising care, added fresh cracked pepper and more parmesan, then carried both plates to her small table. Sit, he said. Lena sat. The carbonara was perfect, creamy and rich, the pancetta crispy, the cheese sharp and salty. She closed her eyes for a moment, savoring it. This is incredible, she said. My father's recipe. He made it every Sunday. Adrian twirled pasta on his fork, his expression distant. After he died, I couldn't eat it for almost a year. Too many memories. But then I realized that was exactly why I should make it. To keep him alive somehow, to remember who he was beyond the empire, beyond the violence. Just a man who loved his family and made really good carbonara. How did he die? Heart attack, quick, painless. He was 62. Adrian took a sip of wine. Sometimes I think he got lucky, going out that way instead of the way most men in our world go, bloody and violent and alone. He died in his sleep, in his own bed, with my mother beside him. That's a gift in this life. Do you think you'll get that gift when your time comes? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, studying his wine. Honestly? No. I think I'll die the way Sophia died, a casualty of the life I chose, the consequences catching up to me when I least expect it. But that's the bargain I made, power and protection in exchange for a short, brutal life. I went into this with my eyes open. Doesn't that scare you? Every single day. But fear is just information, Lena. It tells you what matters, what you stand to lose, and I've learned to use that, to let fear make me careful instead of reckless. He met her eyes across the table. But being with you, talking like this, cooking dinner, pretending we're just two normal people on a Wednesday night, that scares me more than any of Romano's threats ever could. Lena's breath caught. Why? Because it makes me want things I can't have. Normal things. A future that doesn't end in blood and bullets. Someone to come home to who sees me as more than just the violence I commit. Adrian's voice dropped to barely a whisper. It makes me hope. And hope is dangerous in my world. She should tell him to stop, should put distance between them before this thing went any further. But Lena was tired of should, tired of playing it safe, of running from everything that scared her. Maybe hope is exactly what you need, she said. Adrian's laugh was soft, almost sad. Maybe. Or maybe it's just another way to get hurt. They finished dinner in comfortable silence, the rain pattering against the windows, the apartment warm and close. Adrian told her about his day, meetings with his accountant, a situation at the docks that needed handling, a call from his mother asking when he'd visit. Normal things wrapped in the context of his very abnormal life. Lena found herself telling him about the restaurant, about the regular who always ordered veal parmigiana and left exactly 15% tips, about Gabriella's theories on love and the knowing looks she'd been giving Lena all week. Gabriella's a romantic, Adrian said with a smile. She's been trying to set me up with someone for years. Her niece, her friend's daughter, the woman who owns the bookstore on Fifth Avenue. She thinks I'm lonely. Are you? Yes, but being lonely is safer than being vulnerable. Adrian stood, started clearing the dishes. Vulnerability gets you killed in my world. Or worse, gets the people you care about killed. Lena helped him wash up, their shoulders brushing in the small kitchen space. The contact was electric, every touch sending sparks up her arm. She wondered if he felt it too, this current running between them, or if she was imagining the tension. I should go, Adrian said when the dishes were done, but he didn't move toward the door, just stood there looking at her like he was trying to memorize her face. This was nice. Normal. Thank you for letting me pretend for a few hours. You don't have to pretend with me, Lena said. I see you, Adrian. Not the king, or the crime boss, or whatever else people call you. Just you. And you don't scare me. Maybe you should be scared. Maybe that would be smarter. I'm tired of being smart. I'm tired of running from everything that makes me feel alive. She took a step closer, close enough to smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that made her want to lean in. You make me feel alive, Adrian. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm actually living instead of just surviving. Lena. His voice was rough, strained. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do, and I'm choosing to say it anyway. Isn't that what you told me? That choice matters? She reached up, touched his face, felt the rough stubble along his jaw. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. Adrian caught her wrist, but not the way Marcus used to, not to hurt or control, just to hold her, to keep her steady. His eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for fear, for any sign she didn't mean it. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. This is a mistake, he whispered. Probably. I'm going to hurt you, maybe not intentionally, but in my world everyone I care about ends up hurt. I've already been hurt. I survived it. Lena's voice was steady, sure. I can survive you too. I don't want you to have to survive me. I want... He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. I want to be someone who makes your life better, not worse. Someone who protects you instead of putting you in danger. Then be that person. Adrian closed his eyes, rested his forehead against hers. For a moment they just stood there, breathing the same air, existing in the same space. Then he kissed her, soft and careful, like she was something precious that might break. Lena kissed him back, rising on her toes, her hands finding his hair. The kiss deepened, became less careful and more desperate. Years of loneliness and fear burning away in the heat of it, leaving something raw and real behind. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian looked stunned, like he'd been hit by something he never saw coming. "Stay," Lena said. "Please, I don't want to be alone tonight." "Lena, I can't. If I stay, I won't want to leave. And this thing between us, it's already complicated enough without—" "I don't care about complicated. I care about this. About you." She took his hand, laced their fingers together. "Stay." Adrian studied their joined hands for a long moment. Then he nodded, a decision made, a line crossed that neither of them could uncross. They ended up on her bed, still clothed, just holding each other while the storm raged outside. Adrian's arms around her felt nothing like Marcus's had. No possessiveness, no demand for more than she wanted to give. Just comfort and warmth and the steady beat of his heart against her ear. "Tell me about your family," Lena said into the darkness. "Your mother, your brothers, the life before all this." Adrian's voice rumbled through his chest, a sound she felt more than heard. "My mother's a saint, literally. She volunteers at the church, runs a soup kitchen, pretends her sons are an import-export, because acknowledging the truth would break her heart. Marco's the oldest. He's all business, no emotion, sees people as assets or liabilities. Luca's the charmer, could talk his way out of anything as a kid, still can. And then there's me, the youngest. The one who was supposed to go to college, become a lawyer, maybe, get out. What stopped you?" "My father's death. Someone had to take over Brooklyn, and my brothers didn't want it. Too much responsibility, not enough profit. So I stepped up. Told myself it would be temporary, just until things stabilized. That was 8 years ago." "Do you regret it?" "Sometimes. Late at night when I can't sleep, when I'm adding up all the violence I've committed or ordered or allowed in the name of maintaining order. But then I think about people like Antonio, like Mrs. Chen, like all the families who depend on me to keep this neighborhood safe. And I remember why I stayed." Lena traced patterns on his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. "You're a good man, Adrian Valenti. I don't care what anyone else says." "I've done terrible things, Lena. Things that would make you run if you knew the full extent." "Everyone's done terrible things, that the difference is whether you're trying to be better or just making excuses." She tilted her head to look at him. "You're trying to be better. I can see it." Adrian's smile was sad. "You see what you want to see, but I'll take it. For tonight, I'll take it." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the rain a lullaby against the windows. And for the first time since Sophia died, Adrian slept without nightmares. For the first time since leaving Marcus, Lena slept without fear. For one perfect night, they were just two people finding comfort in the darkness. Morning came too soon, pale November light filtering through the curtains. Lena woke to find Adrian already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Hi," she said, her voice rough with sleep. "Hi." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I should go. Victor will be looking for me. We have a meeting this morning." "With Romano?" Adrian's expression darkened. "Among others. Things are escalating. He's making moves that can't be ignored anymore." Fear clutched at Lena's chest. "What kind of moves?" "The kind that require a response, a strong one." Adrian sat up, running his hands through his hair. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought it up. This isn't your problem. If it affects you, it's my problem." Lena sat up beside him. "Tell me what's happening, please." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, a sound that carried the weight of the world. "Romano's been pushing into Red Hook for months. Small things at first. Protection rackets, gambling operations, drugs. Things I could overlook because the alternative was war. But last week he burned down a restaurant that refused to pay his protection fees. Killed the owner and his son. Sent a message that he doesn't care about the old rules anymore." "What old rules?" No civilians, no kids, no burning down the neighborhood we're supposed to be protecting. My father and Romano's father had an understanding. They could fight over territory, over money, over power. But the people caught in the middle stayed safe. That was the line. Adrian's voice was hard, cold. Romano crossed it. And now I have to respond, or everyone will think I'm weak, that I can't protect what's mine. Lena's stomach turned to ice. What are you going to do? What I have to. Meet with the other families. Make it clear that what Romano did was unacceptable. Give him a chance to back down before this turns into something bigger. He looked at her, and his eyes were tired, ancient. And if he doesn't back down, I'm going to war. The word hung in the air between them. War, with all its implications of violence and death and consequences neither of them could fully predict. When? Lena whispered. Tomorrow night, neutral ground. Every major family in Brooklyn will be there. Adrian stood, started straightening his clothes. I need you to promise me something. Anything. If things go bad, if I don't come back from that meeting, Victor knows to get you out. New identity, new city, enough money to start over somewhere far from here. You don't argue, you don't try to stay, you just go. Understand? Adrian, no. Promise me, Lena. His voice was sharp, desperate. Promise me you'll let Victor get you to safety if this all falls apart. She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him she'd stay and fight, that she wouldn't abandon him. But the look in his eyes stopped her. This wasn't a request, it was a need. He needed to know she'd be safe, that if he died trying to protect his kingdom, at least she'd survive. I promise, she said quietly. Adrian pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. Thank you. Come back to me, Lena said against his chest. Whatever happens tomorrow night, you come back. I'll try, but in my world, trying isn't always enough. He left before she could respond, before she could tell him that trying had to be enough, because the alternative was unbearable. Lena spent the day in a fog, going through the motions at the restaurant but barely present. Gabriella noticed, pulled her aside during the afternoon lull. What's wrong, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost. Adrian has a meeting tomorrow night, with Romano, with all the families. Gabriella's expression shifted, concern bleeding into something harder, knowing. I see. And he told you this why? Because we're... Lena stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. What were they? Not quite together, not just neighbors. Something undefined and fragile and possibly doomed. Because he wanted me to know, in case things go bad. Listen to me carefully. Gabriella took Lena's hands, her grip firm. Men like Adrian, they live with death as a constant companion. They make plans, they take precautions, they prepare for the worst because in their world, the worst happens more often than not. But that doesn't mean you should live that way too. I don't know how to live any other way anymore. First Marcus, now this. It feels like I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then stop waiting. Stop living in fear of what might happen and start living in the reality of what is. Gabriella's voice gentled. Right now, Adrian's alive. Right now, you have today. Don't waste it worrying about tomorrow. Lena wanted to believe her, wanted to live in the moment instead of dreading the future. But fear had become such a familiar companion, she didn't know how to let it go. That night, she lay in bed, the bed where Adrian had held her just hours before, and tried not to think about tomorrow. Tried not to imagine him walking into that meeting and never walking out. Tried not to count all the ways this could end in blood and loss and her running again. A knock at the door made her jump. She checked the time, almost midnight. Who would be knocking this late? She looked through the peephole and saw Adrian standing in the hallway, still dressed in his suit from whatever business had kept him away all day. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, his tie loosened and hanging around his neck. Lena opened the door without hesitation. I couldn't sleep, Adrian said simply, and I didn't want to be alone. Can I come in? She stepped back, letting him enter. He moved past her, shrugging off his jacket and draping it over her chair. Then he just stood there, looking lost in a way she'd never seen before. Talk to me, Lena said. What happened today? I met with my brothers, tried to convince them to back me if this thing with Romano goes bad. Marco said he would, but only if I gave him Queens after it's over. Luca said he'd stay neutral, my own family, and they're already dividing up my territory like I'm already dead. They're scared. They're vultures. Adrian's voice was bitter. But I can't blame them. This is what our world teaches us. Everyone's an enemy, even family, especially family. Trust gets you killed. Lena moved to him, put her hands on his chest. You can trust me. I know, that's what scares me most. He covered her hands with his. If I die tomorrow night, I need you to know what happened between us, what's happening. It's the most real thing I've felt in years, maybe ever. You're not just some woman I'm protecting. Don't. Lena pressed her fingers to his lips. Don't say goodbye. Not yet. We still have tonight. Adrian kissed her fingers, then her palm, then pulled her close and kissed her properly, deep and hungry and edged with desperation, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her, the feel of her, everything about this moment in case it was his last. They ended up in bed again, but this time there was no careful distance, no keeping clothes on as a barrier. This time was different. Urgent and raw and honest in a way that left no room for doubt about what they were to each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Lena's head on Adrian's chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. I need to tell you something, Adrian said quietly, about tomorrow night, about what I'm walking into. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Because if something happens to me, you need to understand why. You need to know this wasn't recklessness or pride. It was necessity. Lena propped herself up on one elbow, looking at him. Tell me. Romano's not just making a power play. He's working with someone inside my organization, someone who's been feeding him information, helping him undermine me from within. I don't know who yet, but tomorrow night when I confront him in front of all the families, I'm betting he'll slip up, that his contact will reveal themselves somehow. It's a trap, Lena, for him and for whoever's betraying me. That's incredibly dangerous. Yes, but it's the only way to root out the traitor and show everyone that I'm not weak, that crossing me has consequences. Adrian's voice was steady, resolved. If I can pull this off, expose Romano's contact, prove he broke the old rules, unite the other families against him, I can end this without a full war. But if you fail, you die. Probably. Or worse, I lose everything. My territory, my power, my ability to protect the people who depend on me, including you. He pulled her closer. That's why I need to know you'll let Victor get you out. Why I need that promise. I promised, but I don't have to like it. Lena's voice broke slightly. I just found you, Adrian. I just started feeling like maybe I could have something good, something real, and now you're asking me to prepare to lose it all. I'm asking you to survive. Whatever else happens, I need you to survive. His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're stronger than you think, Lena Hart. Strong enough to rebuild, to start over, to have the life you deserve, with or without me. I don't want it without you. You might not have a choice, and if you don't, if tomorrow night goes wrong and I don't come back, I need you to promise me one more thing. What? Don't mourn me. Don't waste your life grieving for a man who chose violence and paid the price. Just live. Really live. Write your stories. Fall in love with someone who can give you normal. Be the person you were before Marcus tried to break you. Adrian's voice was fierce, almost angry. Promise me you'll live, Lena, not just survive. Live. Tears burned in her eyes, spilled down her cheeks. That's not fair. You can't ask me to. I can and I am, because if I'm going to die protecting this neighborhood, protecting you, I need to know it meant something. That you'll take the freedom I'm giving you and use it. That you won't let this world steal your light the way it stole Sophia's. Lena understood then. This wasn't just about her. This was about his sister, about his guilt, about his desperate need to save someone since he couldn't save the person who mattered most. I'll live, she whispered. If the worst happens, I'll live. I promise. Adrian pulled her back down against his chest, held her so tightly she could barely breathe. They stayed like that until dawn broke over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that seemed impossibly beautiful, given what the day might bring. When morning came, Adrian dressed in silence, his movements mechanical and precise. Lena watched him from the bed, memorizing everything, the way he buttoned his shirt, the way he tied his tie, the way he ran his fingers through his hair to tame it. "I have to go," he said when he was ready. "Meetings all day, preparations. I probably won't see you again until after tomorrow night. Be careful. Always." Adrian came back to the bed, kissed her one more time, soft and lingering, and goodbye. "Remember your promises. Both of them." Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving Lena alone with her fear and her promises and the terrible certainty that nothing would ever be the same after tomorrow night. She went to work because the alternative was sitting in her apartment driving herself crazy with worry. The restaurant was busy, pre-holiday crowds filling the tables, but Lena moved through it like a ghost. Even Gabriella couldn't pull her out of the darkness. The day crawled by. Evening came, then night. Lena went home, locked her doors, and waited. For what? She wasn't sure. News? Victor coming to tell her Adrian was dead? Adrian himself walking through her door with that smile that made her forget he was dangerous? At midnight, her phone rang, the one Adrian had given her. She answered without looking at the screen. "Lena," Victor's voice, rough and urgent. "You need to pack. Now. I'm coming to get you in 10 minutes. Her heart stopped. "What happened? Is Adrian—" "Just pack. I'll explain when I get there. Move." The line went dead. Lena stared at the phone, her hands shaking. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading. Victor was coming to take her away, which meant Adrian was either dead or close to it, which meant her promises were about to be tested. She forced herself to move, to grab her suitcase, to throw in clothes and toiletries and the money from her lockbox. Everything she owned in 10 minutes or less, a life condensed into portable pieces again. She'd just zipped the suitcase when heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. Victor burst through her door. She'd left it unlocked for him, his face grim. "We have to go, now. Tell me what happened, please. Tomorrow night's meeting got moved up. It's happening now, and it's going bad." Victor grabbed her suitcase. "Adrian made me promise to get you out before the shooting started, so that's what I'm doing. Come on." "Shooting? Victor, what?" "No time. Questions later. Move." He practically dragged her down the stairs and into a waiting car, Mikhail at the wheel. They pulled away from the building just as the first siren started wailing in the distance. Lena twisted in her seat, looking back at the building that had been her home, her sanctuary, her chance at something better. Looking back at the life she was leaving behind. Looking back toward Adrian, walking into whatever hell had erupted at that meeting. And praying he'd survive long enough for her to see him again. The safe house was in Staten Island, a nondescript townhouse on a quiet street where no one asked questions and everyone minded their own business. Victor hustled Lena inside while Mikhail stayed with the car, engine running, ready to move at a moment's notice. The interior was sparse but clean, basic furniture, blackout curtains, a kitchen stocked with non-perishables, a place designed for people who needed to disappear quickly and stay hidden. "Wait here," Victor said, checking his phone for what must have been the 10th time since they'd left Brooklyn. "Don't go near the windows. Don't open the door for anyone except me or Mikhail. And for the love of all that's holy, don't call anyone." "Victor, please." Lena grabbed his arm before he could leave. "Tell me what's happening. Is Adrian alive?" Victor's expression was impossible to read in the dim light. "Last I heard, yeah. But the situation's fluid. Romano brought twice as many men as agreed. Someone tipped him off about Adrian's plan. It's a bloodbath." The words hit like physical blows. "Who tipped him off? Who's the traitor?" "Don't know yet. But when we find out..." Victor's jaw tightened. "Just stay here. Stay safe. That's what Adrian wants. That's what he needs right now. To know you're not in the line of fire." He left before she could ask anything else, the door locking behind him with a finality that made Lena's chest ache. She sank onto the couch, her suitcase still clutched in her hand, and tried to process what was happening. Somewhere across the water, Adrian was fighting for his life, for his territory, for everything he'd built and everyone who depended on him. And she was here, hidden away like something precious and fragile, useless and safe, while the man she... Lena stopped that thought before it could complete itself. She couldn't think about what Adrian meant to her, not now. Couldn't let herself feel the depth of what she stood to lose, because if she did, she'd fall apart completely. So instead, she unpacked methodically. Hung clothes in the closet, put toiletries in the bathroom, made the bed with sheets she found in a linen closet, turned the safe house into something resembling a home because doing normal things kept the panic at bay. Hours crawled by. Midnight became 1 a.m., then 2, then 3. Lena sat by the window, not near it, but close enough to see the street, and waited. Her phone stayed silent. No calls, no texts, no news. The not knowing was its own kind of torture. At 4:30 in the morning, headlights appeared at the end of the street. Lena's heart leapt, then crashed when she realized it wasn't Victor's car. Wrong make, wrong color. The vehicle slowed as it passed the safe house, and for a horrible moment she thought it might stop. It kept going. Lena released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. The phone rang at 5 a.m., Victor's number flashing on the screen. Lena answered before the second ring. "He's alive," Victor said without preamble, and Lena's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. "Hurt, but alive. We're bringing him to you now. He refused to go to a hospital." "How bad?" "Bad enough. Bullet grazed his shoulder, couple broken ribs, lost a lot of blood. But he's conscious and talking, which means he'll probably live to be an insufferable pain in my neck for another few decades." Victor's attempt at humor fell flat. "We'll be there in 20 minutes. Get the first aid kit from under the bathroom sink and boil some water." "Victor?" 20 minutes, Lena. Be ready." The line went dead again. Lena forced herself to move, to function despite the fear and relief warring in her chest. She found the first aid kit exactly where Victor said it would be. A professional-grade trauma kit that spoke to how often this safe house had been used for exactly this purpose. She boiled water, gathered clean towels, cleared the kitchen table of everything except a lamp she positioned for maximum light. When the headlights appeared again, she knew it was them. Victor's car pulled into the driveway, and Mikhail was out almost before it stopped, opening the back door with urgent care. Adrian emerged slowly, supported on both sides by his bodyguards. Even in the pre-dawn darkness, Lena could see the blood soaking through his white shirt, the way he favored his left side, the tight lines of pain around his mouth. But he was alive. He was here. She opened the door before they reached it, stepping back to let them through. Victor and Mikhail half-carried Adrian to the kitchen table, laying him down with surprising gentleness. "Hey," Adrian said, his voice rough but recognizable. "Sorry about the dramatic entrance." Lena's laugh was more sob than anything else. "You're an idiot." "Yeah, I've been told." He tried to smile, winced instead. "But I'm your idiot. That counts for something, right?" Victor was already cutting away Adrian's shirt, revealing the damage. The bullet wound on his shoulder was messy but clean, in one side and out the other, missing bone and major arteries by what looked like centimeters. His ribs were another story, purple-black bruises blooming across his left side where someone had clearly worked him over. "What the hell happened?" Lena asked, helping Victor clean the wounds. "Ambush," Adrian said through gritted teeth. "Romano knew we were coming, knew our plan, had shooters positioned in the building before we even arrived," he hissed as Victor probed the shoulder wound. "We walked right into it. The traitor? Dead. Turned out to be Carmine, one of my father's oldest friends. Been on Romano's payroll for 6 months. Adrian's voice was flat, emotionless. Mikhail put 3 bullets in him before he could finish selling us out. Mikhail, standing by the door keeping watch, didn't even blink at the mention of his actions. Just kept his eyes on the street, on potential threats, on doing his job. "And Romano?" Lena asked quietly. Adrian's smile was cold and sharp. "Also dead. I made sure of it personally before his men dragged him out. But not before he told me everything, who he'd corrupted, which families were backing him, what his endgame was. Turns out this wasn't just about territory. He wanted me dead specifically, some grudge about my father disrespecting his father 20 years ago. So it's over, the war? This war, yeah. Romano's lieutenants scattered the moment their boss went down. The other families saw which way the wind was blowing and backed me. For now." Adrian caught her hand, squeezed it weakly. "But there'll be another war eventually. There always is. That's the cost of this life." Victor finished bandaging the shoulder wound, moved to wrapping Adrian's ribs. You need a doctor, a real one, not my field medic special. Can't risk it, not yet. Give me a few days for things to settle, then we'll see. Adrian's eyes never left Lena's face. I'm sorry for scaring you, for making you run, for all of this. Don't apologize for surviving. Lena brushed hair back from his forehead, felt the fever already building under his skin. But Victor's right. You need proper medical care. I have you, that's enough. I'm not a doctor, Adrian. I'm a waitress who took a first aid class in community college. That doesn't qualify me to sit. I trust you more than any doctor. His voice was fierce despite the pain. Just stay. Please, don't leave. The vulnerability in those words broke something in Lena's chest. This man, this powerful, dangerous man who controlled half of Brooklyn, was begging her to stay like he was afraid she'd disappear if he closed his eyes. I'm not going anywhere, she said softly. I promise. Adrian relaxed slightly, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Victor finished with the bandages and stepped back, assessing his work with a critical eye. He needs antibiotics, painkillers, and about 3 days of sleep. Victor looked at Lena. Can you handle that? Yes? Good. We'll bring supplies in a few hours. For now, Mikhail and I need to get back to Brooklyn. Damage control. Make sure Romano's people understand the new reality. Victor paused at the door. You did good tonight, boss. Sophia would be proud. Adrian's expression crumpled for just a moment before he got it under control. Thanks, V. Be careful out there. Always am. Then they were gone, and Lena was alone with Adrian in a safe house in Staten Island, the morning sun just starting to paint the sky pink and gold through the blackout curtains. Help me to the couch, Adrian said. Table's killing my back. Lena helped him stand, taking most of his weight as they shuffled to the living room. He collapsed onto the couch with a groan, and she immediately started fussing, pillows behind his head, blanket over his legs, water glass on the side table within reach. You're going to make yourself sick hovering, Adrian said, but there was warmth in his voice. Then stop getting shot, and I'll stop hovering. Lena sat on the edge of the couch, careful not to jostle him. You scared me. When Victor called and said to pack, I thought, I know, I'm sorry. Adrian caught her hand again, threaded their fingers together. But I meant what I said before, about you being the most real thing I've felt in years, about not wanting to waste a single moment we have together. He pulled her closer, until she was lying beside him on the couch, tucked against his uninjured side. I could have died tonight. Should have died, probably, and all I could think about was getting back to you, making sure you were safe, telling you... He stopped, seemed to struggle with whatever came next. Telling me what? Lena prompted. That I'm falling in love with you. Maybe already fell, I don't know. Time gets weird when someone's shooting at you. Adrian's laugh was soft, pained. I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other. But Lena, when I thought I might not make it out of that building, the only thing I regretted was not telling you the truth, not being honest about what you mean to me. Lena's breath caught. She should say it back, should tell him she felt the same way, that these past weeks had fundamentally changed something in her, that she couldn't imagine going back to a life where he wasn't in it. But the words stuck in her throat, tangled up with fear and old wounds and the terrible certainty that loving someone like Adrian meant signing up for a lifetime of nights like this one, of violence and fear and waiting to find out if he'd survived. Adrian seemed to sense her hesitation. You don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for promises or declarations, just needed you to know. In case... He stopped, swallowed hard. In case there's a next time and I don't make it back. Don't talk like that. It's reality, Lena. My reality. And if you're going to be part of my life, you need to understand what that means. The danger isn't going to stop. There will always be another Romano, another war, another night where I might not come home. I know that. Do you? Because knowing intellectually and living it are two different things. You could have a normal life, Lena. Find some nice guy who works in an office and comes home every night at 6. Someone who doesn't have enemies or bodyguards or blood on his hands. You deserve that. You deserve normal. Lena thought about Marcus, her normal relationship that had nearly killed her, about the years she'd spent trying to be small and quiet, and invisible, trying to survive rather than live. "I don't want normal," she said quietly. "I want real. I want honest. I want someone who sees me completely and doesn't run away from what they see." She shifted to look at Adrian properly, ignoring the way he winced at the movement. "You're dangerous and complicated and probably going to get yourself killed someday doing something noble and stupid. But you're also kind and loyal, and you make me feel alive in a way I never thought I'd feel again. So no, I don't want normal. I want you." Adrian's eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for fear, for any sign she didn't mean it. Whatever he found must have satisfied him because he pulled her into a kiss, gentle and careful and sweet, despite the pain he must have been in. "I love you," he said against her lips, "and I'm going to do everything in my power to keep you safe, to give you a life worth living, to be worthy of what you're offering me." "You already are," Lena whispered. "You already are." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other as the sun rose fully and Brooklyn woke up across the water. Eventually, Adrian fell asleep, exhaustion and blood loss pulling him under despite his attempts to stay conscious. Lena watched him sleep, this dangerous man who'd somehow become her whole world in the span of a few weeks. She traced the lines of his face, the sharp cheekbones, the strong jaw, the lips that could smile with such surprising warmth. Memorized him in the morning light like she was trying to capture this moment forever. Because Victor was right. There would be another war eventually. Another enemy, another fight, another night of wondering if Adrian would survive. But for now, in this moment, he was alive and safe and hers. And that was enough. The next 3 days passed in a strange kind of domesticity. Lena tended Adrian's wounds, changed his bandages, made sure he took the antibiotics Victor delivered, along with painkillers and groceries and updates on the situation in Brooklyn. Adrian slept most of the first day, waking only to eat and use the bathroom before exhaustion claimed him again. By the second day, he was restless, trying to work from the couch despite Lena's protests. Phone calls with his brothers, with the other families, with Antonio and Mrs. Chen, and a dozen other people who needed reassurance that he was alive and in control. "You're supposed to be resting," Lena said, taking his phone away mid-conversation with Marco. "I am resting. I'm sitting down, aren't I?" Adrian reached for the phone. "Give it back. This is important." "Your health is important. Brooklyn will survive a few days without your constant attention." "That's not how this works, Lena. I show weakness for even a moment, and someone will try to fill the vacuum. That's the nature of power. You either hold it or lose it. There's no middle ground." Lena thought about that as she made lunch, soup from a can, bread from the groceries Victor had brought, about the burden Adrian carried, this constant need to project strength even when he was bleeding and broken, about how exhausting it must be to never get a moment's rest. "What if you shared the burden?" she asked, setting a bowl in front of him. "Got help from people you trust?" "I do get help. Victor, Mikhail, a dozen others who handle day-to-day operations. But the big decisions, the life and death calls, those have to be mine. That's what it means to be in charge." "And what happens when you're too injured to make those calls? Or too tired to think straight? What happens when carrying everything alone breaks you?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment, stirring his soup without eating. "Then I break. And someone else takes over. That's the way it's always been." "It doesn't have to be." Lena sat beside him, covered his hand with hers. "What if you built something different? Something sustainable that didn't require you to sacrifice yourself constantly?" "You're talking about legitimizing the operation, going legal. I'm talking about finding a balance. You can't protect people if you're dead, Adrian. You can't build a better neighborhood if you burn yourself out trying to control every detail." He looked at her with something like wonder. "You really believe that, don't you? That I could have something more than this cycle of violence and control?" "I believe you're smart enough to build whatever you want. The question is, what do you want?" Adrian set down his spoon, pulled her closer until she was practically in his lap. "I want you. I want mornings like the farmer's market and dinners I cook in your kitchen. I want to stop looking over my shoulder every second of every day. I want—" He paused. "I want what my father never got. A chance to grow old. To see my children grow up. To die in my own bed instead of in some alley with a bullet in my back." Then build that. Start planning for it now, while you have time. It's not that simple. Nothing worth having ever is. Lena kissed him softly. But you're not alone anymore. You have me, and I'm not going anywhere. Adrian's smile was bright enough to light up the room. You promise? I promise. By the third day, Adrian was healing visibly. The fever had broken, the wounds were closing cleanly, and he could move without wincing every few seconds. Victor came by in the evening with news from Brooklyn. Romano's organization had fully collapsed, the territory absorbed by Adrian's people without significant resistance. The other families had formally recognized Adrian's authority over Red Hook and the surrounding neighborhoods. You won, Victor said simply. Completely. No one's going to challenge you for a long time after what happened at that meeting. What about Carmine's family? Adrian asked. His wife, his kids? Taken care of? Pension, housing, everything your father would have provided. They don't know about the betrayal. Far as they're concerned, Carmine died fighting beside you. Victor's expression was grim. Figured they'd suffered enough without adding shame to grief. Adrian nodded slowly. Good. That's good. Make sure they want for nothing, understand? This doesn't touch them. Already done, boss. After Victor left, Lena asked the question that had been bothering her since she'd heard about Carmine. Why protect his family? He betrayed you, nearly got you killed. Because his wife and kids didn't betray me. They're innocent, and in my world, we don't punish the innocent for the sins of their family. That's the line that separates us from animals. Adrian's voice was firm. My father taught me that. Said the moment you start targeting families, targeting children, you become the monster everyone thinks you are. I won't cross that line. Not ever. Lena thought about Romano burning down a restaurant, killing a father and son, about the line he'd crossed that had started this whole war, about how Adrian's code of honor was the only thing standing between Brooklyn and chaos. You're a good man, she said quietly. I'm a man trying to be good. There's a difference. Adrian pulled her down onto the couch beside him. But having you here, having something to protect beyond just territory and pride, it helps. Makes the violence feel like it has a purpose beyond just maintaining power. They spent that evening planning, talking about the future in a way Lena had never dared before. Adrian told her about properties he owned that could be converted to legitimate businesses, about investments his accountant had been pushing for years that might provide income without the constant risk, about the possibility of a life that wasn't defined entirely by violence and fear. It won't happen overnight, he cautioned, and I'll never be completely legitimate. Too many people depend on the current system. Too many families would suffer if I just walked away. But gradually, over years, I could build something different, something better, something you could be proud of. Something Sophia would have been proud of, Adrian corrected. That's what matters. Building the world she wanted to live in, even if she's not here to see it. Lena understood then that everything Adrian did, the protection, the code of honor, the careful balance between power and responsibility, was in service of a ghost. His sister's memory driving him to be better, to do better, to create something worth the sacrifice. It was beautiful and heartbreaking in equal measure. That night they made love properly for the first time since Adrian had been injured. Slow and careful, mindful of his healing wounds, but intimate in a way that went beyond physical. This was choosing each other with full knowledge of what that choice meant, the danger and the violence and the uncertain future. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Adrian's arms around her, Lena allowed herself to hope. Not for normal, she'd meant what she said about not wanting that, but for something sustainable, something that didn't end in blood and bullets and her running again. I love you, she said into the quiet. The first time she'd said the words out loud, and they felt right. True in a way nothing had felt true in years. Adrian's arms tightened around her. Say it again. I love you. One more time. I love you, Adrian Valenti, completely, dangerously, probably stupidly given your habit of getting shot. But I love you. His laugh rumbled through his chest. That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Your standards are concerningly low. Or my taste in women is excellent. Adrian kissed the top of her head. We should go back to Brooklyn tomorrow, start rebuilding, start planning for the future we talked about. But tonight, He pulled her closer. Tonight, let's just be. No plans, no strategies, no thinking about tomorrow. Just us. Just us, Lena agreed. They fell asleep like that, tangled together in a safe house in Staten Island. The future uncertain, but possible for the first time since either of them could remember. And for one perfect night, it was enough. Morning came with Victor's phone call, his voice tense with controlled urgency. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Marcus showed up at the restaurant last night looking for Lena, made threats, broke some glasses. Antonio kicked him out, but he's still in the neighborhood asking questions." Lena's blood ran cold. Adrian sat up carefully, wincing at the movement, his expression going hard and dangerous. "Where is he now?" Adrian asked, taking the phone on speaker. "We're watching him. He's staying at a motel on 3rd Avenue. Hasn't made another move yet, but it's only a matter of time." Victor paused. "What do you want us to do?" Adrian looked at Lena, and she saw the question in his eyes. This was her choice to make, her demon to face. He'd support whatever she decided, but he wouldn't take this from her. "I want to face him," Lena said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I want to end this, permanently." "You sure?" Adrian asked quietly. "I'm sure. I'm tired of running, tired of being afraid. He's just a man, and men can be stopped." She met Adrian's eyes. "Help me stop him." Adrian's smile was cold and sharp. "It would be my pleasure." He spoke into the phone. "Victor, keep eyes on Marcus, but don't engage yet. We're coming home." They drove back to Brooklyn in silence, Adrian's hand resting on Lena's knee the entire way. The city looked different somehow, sharper, more real, like she was seeing it clearly for the first time. The buildings that had seemed threatening when she first arrived now felt familiar, safe even. This was her neighborhood now, her home, and Marcus had no right to invade it. Victor met them at Adrian's apartment, Mikhail standing guard in the hallway. Adrian moved stiffly, his injuries still healing, but there was steel in his spine that hadn't been there 3 days ago. Purpose, direction. "He's still at the motel," Victor reported. "Drinking, from what our guy says, getting angrier by the hour. Kept asking the bartender about you, Lena, showing your picture around. Said you stole money from him, that he just wants what's his back." Lena's hands clenched into fists. "I didn't steal anything. I left with what was mine." "We know that, but he's building a narrative, making you the villain so he can justify whatever he's planning." Victor's expression was grim. "He's dangerous, Lena. Drunk and angry and looking for someone to hurt. You sure you want to face him?" "I'm sure," Lena looked at Adrian. "But I need to do this my way. No broken legs, no hospital visits. I need him to understand that I'm not afraid anymore, that he has no power over me." Adrian studied her face, then nodded slowly. "Okay, we do this your way, but I'm there with you. Non-negotiable. I wouldn't want it any other way." They planned carefully, Victor mapping out the motel's layout, Mikhail checking exits and sightlines. It had to be public enough that Marcus couldn't try anything violent, but private enough for the conversation Lena needed to have. They settled on the motel's parking lot, mid-afternoon when there would be witnesses but not crowds. "You don't have to do this," Adrian said for the 3rd time as they drove to the motel the next day. "I can handle Marcus. Make sure he never bothers you again." "I know you can, but this isn't about making him go away. It's about me reclaiming something he took from me." Lena's voice was steady, sure. "He made me believe I was weak, that I needed him, that I couldn't survive without him. I need to prove to both of us that he was wrong." Adrian pulled the car into the motel parking lot, killed the engine. Victor and Mikhail were already there, leaning against their vehicle 3 spaces down, casual but watchful. Insurance, in case things went sideways. Marcus's truck was parked near the entrance, the same battered Ford he'd been driving since before Lena met him. She'd spent countless hours in that truck, watching the world go by, listening to him talk about his dreams and plans and all the things they'd do together someday, back when she'd still believed in some days. "There," Adrian said quietly, nodding toward the motel entrance. Marcus emerged carrying a 12-pack of beer, his gait unsteady. He looked worse than Lena remembered, thinner, more weathered, with the kind of exhaustion that came from drinking too much and sleeping too little. For a moment she almost felt sorry for him. Then she remembered the bruises, the fear, The 1,000 small cruelties that had defined their relationship, the pity evaporated. Lena got out of the car before she could second-guess herself. Adrian was beside her immediately, his presence solid and reassuring. They walked across the parking lot, and Marcus must have sensed them because he looked up, his eyes going wide when he saw Lena. "Baby," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "Baby, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." "Don't call me that." Lena's voice was cold, controlled. "I'm not your baby. I'm not your anything." Marcus's expression shifted, confusion bleeding into anger. "What are you talking about? We had a fight, sure, but you didn't have to run off like that. Didn't have to make me chase you all the way to Brooklyn." His eyes slid to Adrian, narrowed. "Who the hell is this? You cheating on me, Lena? That why you left?" "I left because you hit me, because you made me afraid to exist in my own skin, because loving you was slowly killing me." Lena took a step closer, and she saw Marcus flinch. "Good. Let him be afraid for once." "I'm done, Marcus. Done running, done hiding, done letting you control my life from a distance. This ends now." "You think you can just walk away from me? From us?" Marcus's voice rose, drawing attention from other motel guests. "I gave you everything. A place to live, food to eat, someone to take care of you. And this is how you repay me? By running off with some—" "You gave me bruises and nightmares," Lena interrupted. "You gave me fear and self-doubt and the absolute certainty that I wasn't worth anything beyond what you decided I was worth. That's not love, Marcus. That's ownership, and I'm not anyone's property." Marcus dropped the beer, glass shattering on the pavement. He took a step toward her, his hands clenching into fists, and Adrian moved, subtle but unmistakable, placing himself between them. "I wouldn't do that," Adrian said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made grown men pause. "In fact, I'd suggest you stay exactly where you are and listen to what Lena has to say." "Who the hell are you to tell me?" Marcus started, then stopped as Victor and Mikhail moved closer, their bulk and bearing making their profession obvious. Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. "Wait, you're that guy, the one from the news, Valenti. You're fucking Valenti." "Adrian Valenti," Adrian confirmed. "And Lena is under my protection. Which means if you ever come near her again, if you ever call her or text her or so much as think about her too hard, you'll answer to me personally. Do you understand?" Marcus's face went pale, then flushed with impotent rage. "You can't threaten me. I have rights. She's what?" Adrian's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Your girlfriend? Your property? Because from where I'm standing, she's a woman who left an abusive relationship and is trying to build a new life. And you're a coward who drove 3 hours to harass her instead of moving on like any decent human being would. You don't know anything about us, about what we had." "I know she has bruises from your fists," Adrian cut him off. "I know she flinches when people raise their voices. I know she spent weeks looking over her shoulder, terrified you'd find her. That's what I know about what you had." Marcus looked at Lena, and for a moment she saw something that might have been regret flicker in his eyes. "Lena, please. I'm sorry about before, about hitting you. I was drunk, I was stressed. I didn't mean it. But we can fix this. We can go back to how things were." "I don't want to go back," Lena said firmly. "I don't want the version of me that accepted your abuse and called it love. I don't want the life we had where I made myself smaller and quieter, just to survive. I want the life I'm building now, the one where I'm not afraid." "With him?" Marcus spat, gesturing at Adrian. "You think he's better than me? He's a criminal, Lena, a killer. You're just trading one monster for another." "No." Lena's voice was steady, certain. "Adrian's given me more respect and kindness in a few weeks than you gave me in 2 years. He sees me as a person, not a possession. He protects me without controlling me. And most importantly, he's never once made me afraid of him." "That's because you barely know him. Give it time. He'll show his true colors eventually. They all do." "Maybe," Lena shrugged. "Or maybe I've learned enough about myself to know I won't stay with someone who hurts me. Not again. Not ever." She took a breath, let it out slowly. "I came here to tell you face to face that we're done, that you have no hold on me anymore, that I'm not running or hiding, I'm just done. And if you can't accept that, If you keep coming after me, then you'll deal with the consequences. Marcus laughed, bitter and harsh. Consequences? What are you going to do, Lena? You're nobody. You have no power, no money, no friends. You're just some scared little girl playing dress-up in a world you don't understand. She has me, Adrian said quietly, and Victor, and Mikhail, and about 300 people in Brooklyn who understand exactly who I am and what I protect. So when I say there will be consequences if you bother her again, I'm not making an idle threat. I'm stating a fact. Something in Adrian's tone must have finally penetrated Marcus's alcohol-fueled bravado because he took a step back, his hands unclenching. This is insane. You're both insane. Maybe, Lena said, but I'm alive. I'm free. And I'm happy for the first time in years. Can you say the same? Marcus stared at her, and she watched him truly see her. Not the scared, beaten-down woman he'd controlled for so long, but the person she was becoming. Strong, sure, unafraid. He must not have liked what he saw because his expression twisted into something ugly. You'll regret this. When he gets tired of you, when he throws you away like the trash you are, you'll come crawling back, and I won't be there. Good, Lena said simply. I'm counting on it. She turned away, Adrian's hand finding hers, and they walked back to the car. Behind them, Marcus shouted something, but the words didn't matter anymore. None of it mattered. She'd faced her demon, looked him in the eye, and proven to herself that he had no power over her anymore. The relief was overwhelming. They drove in silence for several blocks before Lena started crying. Not from sadness or fear, but from the sheer cathartic release of it all. Years of tension and terror pouring out of her in great gasping sobs. Adrian pulled over, held her while she cried, his hand gentle on her back. You did so well, he murmured. You were incredible. So strong. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm falling apart. Strength isn't about not falling apart. It's about falling apart and putting yourself back together after. You've done that twice now, once when you left him, once when you faced him. That's more courage than most people show in a lifetime. Lena cried until she had nothing left, until the well was empty and she felt hollowed out but clean. When she finally pulled back, wiping her eyes, Adrian was still there, still steady, still looking at her like she was something precious. Thank you, she said, for being there, for not taking over or trying to handle it for me. That was your battle to fight. I was just there for backup. Adrian brushed a strand of hair from her face. But for what it's worth, watching you stand up to him, watching you take back your power, that was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Even though I cried all over your expensive shirt, especially because you cried all over my expensive shirt, means you trust me enough to fall apart in front of me. That's a gift, Lena. One I don't take lightly. They drove back to the apartment building, but instead of going to their separate units, Adrian took Lena to his. She'd never been inside before, had only seen the hallway outside his door. The interior was surprising. Warm wood floors, exposed brick, furniture that looked comfortable rather than expensive, books everywhere, and photos on the walls. His family, she realized. His mother and brothers. His father in a frame with a black ribbon. And Sophia, young and smiling, frozen in a moment before everything went wrong. This is beautiful, Lena said. It's home. The first place I felt was truly mine after my father died. Adrian moved to the kitchen, started making coffee with the same practiced efficiency he'd shown cooking carbonara. I come here to remember who I am beyond the violence, to be just Adrian instead of Valenti. Can I ask you something? Anything. What happens now? With us? With Marcus? With everything? Adrian brought 2 cups of coffee to the couch, sat beside her. With Marcus, Victor will keep eyes on him for a while. Make sure he actually leaves Brooklyn. If he doesn't, if he makes another move toward you, we'll handle it more permanently. But I think today scared him enough. He's a coward, and cowards don't pick fights they can't win. And with us? Adrian set down his coffee, took her hands in his. With us, I'd like to try building something real. Not just protection or convenience or whatever we told ourselves this was at the beginning, but an actual relationship, with dates and arguments and lazy Sunday mornings and all the normal things people do when they care about each other. That sounds wonderful. But what about your world? The violence, the enemies, the constant danger. I'm working on changing that, legitimizing operations, building legal businesses, finding ways to protect the neighborhood without having to hurt people to do it. It won't happen overnight, but I'm committed to it. Adrian's voice was serious, intent. Because I want a future with you, Lena. Not just weeks or months, but years, decades, if you'll have me. And that means building a life that's sustainable, one where we're not constantly looking over our shoulders. Lena thought about everything she'd learned in the past weeks, about Adrian's code of honor, his loyalty to his people, the way he'd protected her without trying to control her, about how he made her feel safe and seen and valued in a way she'd never experienced before. I want that too, she said quietly. All of it. The future, the normal things, the life we build together, even knowing it won't be easy. Especially knowing it won't be easy. Adrian smiled. Nothing worth having ever is, right? You taught me that. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning their future with the same careful attention Adrian brought to business. Lena would keep working at the restaurant while taking online courses to finish her degree. Creative writing, the dream she'd abandoned when Marcus had convinced her she wasn't talented enough. Adrian would start the process of legitimizing his operations, working with accountants and lawyers to build legal frameworks for his business interests. I want to open a community center, Adrian said as evening fell and they ordered takeout from Bella Notte. Something Sophia always talked about, a place where kids in the neighborhood can get help with homework, learn skills, stay off the streets. I have the money, the connections, the space, just never had the push to actually do it. What changed? You. Meeting you, seeing the world through your eyes. It reminded me why I'm doing any of this, not for power or respect, but to actually help people, to build something better than what I inherited. Adrian pulled her closer. You make me want to be the man you see when you look at me. Someone worthy of your faith. You already are, Lena said. You just needed someone to believe it. Over the following weeks, life settled into a new rhythm. Lena worked at the restaurant, her tips improving as she grew more confident in her skills. She enrolled in online classes and started writing again, short pieces at first, then longer stories about survival and strength and finding yourself in the wreckage of your old life. Adrian began the process of legitimizing his businesses, meetings with lawyers and accountants replacing some of the late-night strategy sessions with Victor. It was slow, frustrating work, but he approached it with the same determination he brought to everything else. They spent their free time together, cooking dinner in Adrian's kitchen, walking through the neighborhood, visiting Mrs. Chen at the farmer's market. Normal things that felt extraordinary simply because they were choosing them together. Marcus stayed away. Victor's reports confirming he'd gone back to wherever he'd come from. Occasionally, Lena would get a text from an unknown number, always blocked immediately, but the messages grew less frequent over time. Eventually, they stopped altogether. She found herself healing in unexpected ways. The flinching stopped first, then the nightmares. The constant anxiety that had lived in her chest for years slowly unwound, leaving space for other feelings. Joy, hope, love. 6 months after that confrontation in the motel parking lot, Adrian took Lena to the site that would become the community center. It was an old warehouse in Red Hook, empty and run down but full of potential. "What do you think?" he asked, watching her explore the space. "I think it's perfect. Sophia would have loved it. She would have loved you too, the way you see the world, the way you believe people can change." That was exactly how she was. All optimism and possibility, even when the world gave her every reason to give up. Lena turned to him, saw the emotion in his eyes. "You miss her. Every day. But meeting you, building this with you, it helps. Like maybe some part of her is still here, pushing me to be better. You want to know what I think?" Lena walked to him, took his hands. "I think Sophia would be proud of who you've become, of the life you're building, the people you're helping, and I think she'd be happy that you found someone who sees you completely and loves you anyway." Adrian's smile was brilliant, transforming his face. "I love you, Lena Hart, more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. I love you too. Even when you're being overprotective and sending bodyguards to follow me to the grocery store. That was one time, and there was credible intelligence about Romano's remaining people. They surrendered 6 months ago, Adrian." Better safe than sorry. He pulled her close, rested his forehead against hers. I'm still learning how to do this. How to love someone without trying to control every variable. How to trust that you'll be okay even when I'm not there to protect you. You're doing fine. Better than fine. Lena kissed him softly. We're both learning. That's what makes it real. They stood in the empty warehouse, holding each other, planning the future. The community center would open in 6 months. Lena would finish her degree in a year. Adrian's businesses were already showing profit. The transition from criminal enterprise to legitimate operation slow but steady. It wasn't the fairy tale ending Lena might have imagined as a girl. No white knight, no perfect rescue, no simple happily ever after. But it was real. Built on honesty and trust, and the willingness to choose each other every single day, despite the complications. A year after moving to Brooklyn, Lena stood in her new apartment, not the dingy studio where she'd started, but a beautiful one-bedroom in a renovated brownstone Adrian owned. Her laptop sat open on the kitchen table, her first published short story displayed on the screen. A small literary magazine, nothing major, but it was hers. Her words, her truth, out in the world for people to read. Adrian was at a meeting with city officials about the community center's final permits, but he'd left her a note on the counter written in his neat, precise handwriting. Congratulations, my love. This is just the beginning. I'm so proud of you. Alina read it 3 times, warmth spreading through her chest. She'd come so far from the scared woman who'd shown up in the rain with nothing but a suitcase and fear. That woman would barely recognize who she'd become. Confident, published, loved by a man who saw her as an equal partner rather than a possession. The door opened and Adrian walked in carrying flowers. Sunflowers, bright and cheerful, her favorites. He'd been paying attention again, noticing the small things that mattered. For the published author, he said, presenting them with a flourish. I'm taking you to dinner. Somewhere fancy. We're celebrating. You don't have to. I want to. Let me spoil you a little. You deserve it. Adrian set the flowers in a vase, then pulled her into his arms. I'm so proud of you, Lena. Not just for the story, but for everything. For surviving, for rebuilding, for becoming this incredible person who makes me want to be better every single day. You're pretty incredible yourself. The community center is almost finished. Your mother actually smiled at me last week when we visited, and Victor says the transition to legitimate business is ahead of schedule. You're building the life you wanted. We're building it, together. Adrian kissed her, deep and sure and full of promise. And I want to keep building it, for years, for the rest of our lives, if you'll have me. Lena pulled back, searched his face. Adrian, are you... He dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. I know it's fast. I know we've only been together officially for a year, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You make me believe in futures that don't end in blood. You make me want to be the man Sophia always believed I could be. You make me human. Lena's hands covered her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. Lena Hart, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of the gift you've given me? Will you build this crazy, complicated, beautiful life with me? She couldn't speak past the emotion clogging her throat, so she just nodded. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. Adrian slid the ring onto her finger, a simple diamond, elegant and understated, perfect, and stood, pulling her into a kiss that felt like coming home. I love you, he said against her lips. Thank you for seeing me, for believing in me, for choosing me. Always, Lena whispered, I'll always choose you. They held each other in the apartment that had become their home, the city spreading out beyond the windows, full of possibility and promise. Lena thought about the journey that had brought her here, the fear, the pain, the desperate flight to Brooklyn. If someone had told her a year ago that running from Marcus would lead her to this moment, she never would have believed them. But here she was, safe, loved, free in ways she'd never thought possible. The community center opened 3 months later, Sophia's name emblazoned above the entrance in elegant gold letters. Lena watched Adrian cut the ribbon, saw the pride and grief mingled in his expression, and squeezed his hand. They'd invited everyone. Antonio and Gabriella from the restaurant, Mrs. Chen from the farmer's market, families from the neighborhood who'd known Adrian's father, and his mother, who cried when she saw Sophia's name. She'd be so proud, his mother said, pulling Adrian into a fierce hug. Of this place, of what you're building, of the man you've become. I'm proud too, mio figlio. The center filled with children within the first week, kids getting help with homework, learning music and art, playing basketball in the gymnasium Adrian had installed. Lena volunteered there twice a week, helping with the writing program she'd developed, teaching children to tell their stories, to find power in words the way she had. The wedding was small, held in the same church where Adrian's father had been eulogized. Just family and close friends, Victor standing as best man, Gabriella dabbing at her eyes from the front row, Antonio giving Lena away since her own father had been absent most of her life. She wore a simple white dress, carried sunflowers instead of roses, and felt more beautiful than she ever had in her life. When Adrian said his vows, promising to protect her without controlling her, to love her without trying to fix her, to build a life worthy of the second chance they'd both been given, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. "I was lost before you," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Drowning in violence and guilt and the certainty that I'd never be anything more than my father's legacy. But you saw something else when you looked at me. Someone capable of change, of growth, of love. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving you right, being the man you believe I am, choosing you every single day for as long as we both shall live." Lena's vows were simpler but no less true. "I was running when I found you, running from pain, from fear, from a version of myself I didn't recognize anymore. But you gave me a reason to stop, to stand still, to believe that maybe I was worth fighting for. You taught me that love doesn't have to hurt, that strength comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is let someone see you completely. I love you, Adrian Valenti. I choose you, today and always." They sealed their promises with a kiss, and as the small congregation cheered, Lena felt something settle in her chest. Peace, wholeness, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The reception was held at Bella Notte, Antonio closing the restaurant to regular customers for the night. They danced to Italian love songs, ate incredible food, and celebrated surrounded by the people who'd become family. Victor gave a surprisingly touching speech about watching Adrian transform from a grief-stricken young man into someone capable of building instead of just protecting. Gabriella sobbed through hers, talking about love and second chances, and how proud she was of both of them. When Lena danced with Adrian under the string lights Antonio had hung for the occasion, she felt tears slip down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. For this moment, this man, this life they were building together. "Happy?" Adrian asked, wiping her tears with his thumb. "Happier than I ever thought possible. Thank you for finding me, for saving me." "You saved yourself, Lena. I just gave you a safe place to land." Adrian pulled her closer and they swayed to the music. "But you saved me too, from becoming the monster everyone thought I was, from losing myself completely to the violence, from forgetting that there's more to life than power and control." "We saved each other then." "Yeah, I guess we did." They danced until late, until the last guests had gone home and it was just the two of them in the empty restaurant. Antonio had left them the key, a wedding gift of privacy and trust. "Come on," Adrian said, taking Lena's hand. "Let's go home." Home. The word resonated through Lena's chest, full of meaning and promise. Not the apartment they shared, though that was home too, but Brooklyn itself, this neighborhood that had given her sanctuary when she needed it most. The streets she walked without fear, the people who knew her name, the life she'd built from nothing. This was home. Adrian was home. And finally, after years of running and hiding and surviving, Lena had found where she belonged. They walked through Brooklyn in the early hours of the morning, hand in hand, watching the city sleep, past the building where they'd first met, past the restaurant where Lena had found purpose, past the community center that bore Sophia's name and carried her legacy forward. "I want to tell you something," Adrian said as they stood outside their building. "The same place where this whole journey had started. Something I should have said a long time ago." "What?" "Thank you for being brave enough to run, to start over, to take a chance on a stranger in a hallway. Thank you for seeing past the violence to the person underneath. Thank you for believing I could be better and then holding me accountable to that belief. Adrian's voice was thick with emotion. You changed my life, Lena. You changed me. And I'm so grateful I get to spend the rest of my life with you. Lena stood on her toes, kissed him softly. The feeling's mutual. Now take me upstairs, husband. We have a whole life to start living. They climbed the stairs together, to the apartment they shared, to the future stretching out before them bright and uncertain and full of possibility. And as Lena fell asleep in Adrian's arms, she thought about the terrified woman who'd arrived in Brooklyn with nothing but a suitcase and fear. That woman had been looking for a place to hide. Instead, she'd found a place to heal, to grow, to become someone she'd never imagined she could be. She'd found love in the most unlikely place, with the most unlikely person. And in finding it, she'd found herself. The journey from running to standing still, from fear to love, from survival to actually living, it had been harder than anything Lena had ever done. But lying here now, safe and loved and home, she knew with absolute certainty that every difficult step had been worth it. Because sometimes the monster you run from leads you to exactly where you need to be. And sometimes the dangerous man in the expensive suit turns out to be the safest place you've ever known. Lena had escaped one cage only to find herself beside another. But this time, she'd discovered something crucial. Adrian's world might be dangerous, might be complicated, might be everything she should run from. But his arms were wide open, not locked. His protection came without possession. His love came without conditions. And that made all the difference. She didn't find safety by running. She found it by standing still long enough to be seen, by choosing love without surrendering herself, by building a life instead of just surviving one. And as Brooklyn slept around them and the future waited bright and ready, Lena Hart, now Lena Valenti, finally stopped running. She was home.